Now, Eddie, we know that Jimmy Cook drives a Tesla, right?
Well, I didn't think the public knew that part of it. We knew that he drove an electric car, but...
Well, didn't he just did he message you, was it this morning or last night, saying that his charging portal is broken and he won't be able to make it in today?
Well, he told us on Friday why he wasn't going to be here, so I don't know if we can...
Thanks for playing along, Eddie.
Well, Jimmy kind of ruined that last week, so we couldn't do it.
People have slept since then, Eddie. Right?
I haven't.
Clearly. Right?
I'm shocked you have.
I have indeed, after a wonderful weekend. How are you? My name is Jake Query. That is Eddie Garrison, also known as the Stick in the Mud of Query & Company. James Boyd is in for Jimmy Cook from The Athletic today. James, coming off the weekend, and we'll get to what everybody did for the weekend in a second, but this is diving right into it, right? Because NBA free agency, isn't this the time of year? Eddie got no sleep because he had his phone set to Woj bomb alerts, and it kept going off over the course of the weekend, right?
Pretty much. I was actually happy to get some shut-eye. I'm no longer in the NBA realm full-time, so when things happen, I don't have to be right near it. But I used to love and hate this time of the year as an NBA beat writer because you want to enjoy the holidays. 4th of July is coming up, but I could never really be away from my phone or my laptop and enjoy the barbecue because you never know when a team's going to make a move. So obviously exciting times in the NBA and a lot of movement, especially in the Eastern Conference, to see where the Pacers kind of stack up now with the new landscape.
The landscape of the NBA changing just a little bit. Some of the bigger names we already know have landed. They have their landing spots. The Pacers are one of those that is, you could say, taking a conservative approach. You could say actually kind of an aggressive approach. We'll get into all of that over the course of the day. But good afternoon to you on a spectacular and gorgeous Monday. Eddie, have you been to San Diego by chance?
I have indeed, Jake.
James, you been to San Diego?
I have not.
This
Only
is what
LA.
it's like in San Diego, 362 days a year. Gorgeous, not a lot of humidity, like a little bit of cool breeze, but a breeze nonetheless to keep things balanced. Absolutely perfect.
Yeah, it feels
Perfect
amazing outside.
At least it was when I came in. Now, we are landlocked here, so we're assuming it's still nice outside.
We'll assume that. We'll assume positive things.
Saturday, for example, we'd have been in trouble because it was nice outside,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden all hell broke loose, and then like an hour later it was gorgeous outside
Yeah, it
again,
was
right?
so weird. I saw some of the different festivals and things like that were canceled here in the Indianapolis area, and I was like, man, that's kind of messed up because it got nice right after. I went right back outside.
Yeah, it was an interesting weekend. There's no question about that. James, let's begin with this. The big news that happened over the course of the weekend is the fact that Obi Toppin is retained by the Indiana Pacers, a 4-year, $60 million contract. One thing that I will say, and this is true for Chad Buchanan, and to be fair, I think it's becoming more true of Chris Ballard, and that is these are guys that pretty much tell you if they say, this is something that we want to do, they pretty much go out and do it. I don't think there's a lot of smokescreen going on. The Pacers had been open about the fact that Obi Toppin was somebody that they were hoping to retain. They were able to do so with a 4-year, $60 million deal. Question is, because of the fact that now puts them basically right at the cap, did Indiana overpay for Obi Toppin? Your thoughts?
I don't think so. I think that it was a move that kind of falls in line with the overall philosophy of running it back with a similar team. Obviously, with the team that made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, you don't want to make a bunch of crazy franchise-altering moves. You kind of just want to retool and refine, and part of that is bringing back some of your core guys. So I think in today's NBA market, it can seem like, oh my gosh, $60 million is a ton of money. What are they doing? But given how much the cap space has changed, how much TV deals and TV rights have changed, we have to look at deals now for role players in a different sense rather than looking at it solely from the money perspective, because we're going to start seeing astronomical numbers for superstars, and then by default, we'll see some bigger numbers for role players. So I think $15 million a year for a player like Obi Toppin, who is young, 26 years old, first player in Pacers franchise history, I believe, with 100 threes and 100 dunks in one season. He fits the modern NBA with his rim running and the ability to shoot the three. Shot it at 40% from last year. So I think they paid good market value for him, not overpaid at all.
And part of the way that became available is the fact that you had an opening with Jalen Smith. They decided Jalen Smith putting himself into free agency, 3-year, $27 million deal with the Chicago Bulls. I think the Pacers have, it is not often that I say this, but in terms of the market where the Pacers play and how that affects the Indiana Pacers, I think Indiana is specifically affected in this free agency turn and the roster building by their market size. And I don't usually say that, but I will elaborate on that more in a second. But to get to that, we'll introduce the fact that Paul George is a Philadelphia 76er, at least once ink hits the paper.
Yep.
George getting a 4-year versus 3-year million or a 4-year deal over $200 million with the Philadelphia 76ers, who also, by the way, signed Eric Gordon for 1 year at $3.3 million. Gordon, obviously, in the twilight of his career. But that now puts Philly with essentially a quote-unquote big three: Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Maxey. Now, the shift in the East, I saw, like, from a national perspective, somebody said, this puts Philadelphia right in the thick of the Eastern Conference Finals with Boston, New York, and Milwaukee. And I'm thinking, I'm not trying to carry the water of the hometown team here, but Indiana was just in the Eastern Conference Finals and actually probably played Boston as well as did Dallas in the finals. I realize Dallas won a game, but and Indiana is building upon its own roster and bringing back a guy that is a borderline starter for them that missed that playoff run. That'll be interesting to see how Mathurin blends in. But James, as somebody who usually poo-poos like the narrative and the argument from fans that, you know, the Pacers get overlooked because it's Indianapolis and not the big – in this particular case, and that's fine. If people want to sleep on Indiana, that's fine. But I think you've got to still consider the Pacers a top half of Eastern Conference contender team. Top 4, top 5 in the conference. Your thoughts?
I agree. I do think that they've been overlooked in the Eastern Conference landscape. I even think a team, small market team like Orlando's sort of been overlooked as well. They picked up Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, big signing for them. They're a young and upcoming team, playoff team, obviously. But as far as the top contenders go, I don't see how you can skip over the Pacers, as I alluded to earlier, about running it back with that same group. If that's a group that made it to the conference finals and they're bringing it back, to me, they're automatically a threat. And again, similar to with the Colts as well, they're just in a different spot. They haven't had as much success as the Pacers, but promises make sense. When you're dealing with teams that don't make sexy, splashy moves, sometimes it can feel like they haven't done enough. But, you know, I'll even ask you, Jake, and Eddie, feel free to chime in, but like, what splashy move were the Pacers ever going to make after having a run like that with a team like this? Are they going to trade for Larry Marketing now? Are they going to, were they going to chase after Paul George in free agency? Like, I get it. I understand that Paul George going to the 76ers is a headliner for sure. I even understand that with the Knicks, trading for Mikal Bridges, and picking up OG Anunoby and making sure that he stays put in free agency. Like, those are big moves, but I think the Pacers, like you said, Jake, played the Celtics pretty well. They have a high-powered offense. Their core is still pretty young. Obviously, Siakam's a little bit older, but Tyrese is there, and all the other pieces are younger players. So I think that they're going to be there. I will add, though, that the East is definitely tougher than it was, in my opinion, let's say a week ago, because of the different moves that have been made and teams trying to chase Boston.
Here's the advantage Indiana has right now, and why I like why there aren't a lot of times. I love Indianapolis. I bleed the torch. You know that, right?
Yep.
I'm cool with Beach Grove. I'm cool with Mars Hill. I'm cool with Carmel. I'm cool with Westfield. I'm cool with Greenfield. You name it. Like, I love all corners of Indianapolis, all people of Indianapolis, right? And I usually want to stand on the top of the mountain and scream about Indianapolis. But I also understand that New York City's pretty darn cool. Probably the
Yeah.
best city in the world. I also understand that Los Angeles is really nice. San Diego, as I mentioned, gorgeous, right? I totally get why players want to play in other markets and why there is advantage oftentimes for those markets to get players to come there, and an advantage that Indianapolis doesn't have. Because one thing about Indianapolis, those of us that live here, those of us that grew up here, those of us that have a great pride about it, one of the great things that we love about Indianapolis is like it's kind of our thing. It's kind of our secret. We understand that people elsewhere, what the perception is of Indy, and so we have kind of this inferiority complex about it. And that inferiority complex manifested itself to a large extent for the fan base of the Indiana Pacers to just accept the fact that Indiana was under a ceiling that they were never going to be able to eclipse through because you couldn't get players here. And there's a disadvantage in building a roster. But let me tell you right now, the advantage of Indiana, the advantage for Chad Buchanan, for Kevin Pritchard in building this roster, and that's the following. The NBA has become, and this really began, if you go back to LeBron James was, and I've said this a million times, LeBron James was, his era was the walk through a door in, that we can never go back and undo. And I don't mean that as a bad thing at all. What I mean is this. Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Isaiah Thomas, Julius Erving, all the way back. Those players were in and of an era where you went to a franchise and you worked year by year by year to get that franchise over the hump. The Pistons had to work forever to finally like break through and get past and beat the Lakers. Actually, the Pistons first off had to break through to beat the Celtics just to get to the finals. Then the Bulls eventually had to beat and bang and break their way through to get past the Pistons. Then the New York Knicks and the Pacers had to wait until Michael Jordan retired and take advantage of those years to break through and put themselves into the upper stratosphere, et cetera, et cetera. Then everything in the early 2000s changed because you saw a decades-long influence of AAU basketball coming. And by that, I mean Michael Jordan played at Lane High School in Wilmington, North Carolina, and then went to the University of North Carolina and went into the NBA and was a Chicago Bull forever. He didn't play. Michael Jordan, the first time that he met, I'm guessing and gathering, that the first time Michael Jordan met Akeem Olajuwon was probably like at some sort of a Final Four event in college. AAU basketball has taken the very top level of players at a very young age, 14, 15 years old, and had them playing against and then later with players from different areas of their region. So when you're 15 years old and you're a top player in AAU basketball and you are playing for the Little Rock Elite and you get beat, then all of a sudden your team, Little Rock Elite, is eliminated. But guess what? The West Memphis Blazers pick you up, and now you're playing with them to go into a further level of the AAU tournament. And now your guys from Little Rock are your guys, but you're also teaming up with the guys from Memphis, and now they're your guys. And now, so you're meeting all these different guys, and you are partnering with them, and the mentality is set in you oftentimes that if you can't beat them, join them. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the influence of AAU and travel basketball is such that players now are recognized by the program that the travel program they grow up with more so than the high school they play for. What happens with that is that then bleeds into the NBA, where when LeBron James went through his free agency after his first contract with Cleveland, he adapted to an extent that mentality. And when he decided and selected where he was going, what you saw was an AAU type approach to it of, I'm teaming up with guys. And we had this conversation years ago. I talked with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh about what it would be like to someday link forces together and create a super team. And that was a boulder in the stream watershed moment to the structure of NBA franchises. And it was advantage big market, advantage lifestyle market, disadvantage Indianapolis, disadvantage Milwaukee, disadvantage Oklahoma City. So what did those franchises have to do? What those franchises had to do was to begin planting pieces and seeds organically, either through drafting young players or through trading for players that are young and talented but unproven that can't get into rotation elsewhere, that you're giving them a lease to show what they can do and hoping that that endears them to where you are, a la Aaron Nesmith. Or drafting players that opportunity is going to allow them to grow before your very eyes, and now you have them because you got them young and you were really savvy in the process, a la Andrew Nimhard. Or making one big trade and getting a guy that is at the end of his time with one franchise and it's just not going to go any further, and showing that you believe in him and hoping that that means that he will sign with you and buy in, a la Pascal Siakam. But the advantage here, James, is this. When you look at Philly, you look at the Lakers, you look at Phoenix, those lifestyle or big market teams have the accessibility to go out and get big-time free agents and piece them together, but you have literally in that situation a 2 and at max 3-year window to get it done. Phoenix was in the finals, 2 years ago? And all of a sudden, they got to blow it up now because the contracts are such that they're up against it, and then guys are becoming unhappy, and they're like, I want to go. Golden State. Golden State had a run, don't get me wrong. But when they got Kevin Durant, it was thought, oh, my gosh, here we go. 8 years of dynasty in Golden State. The Larry O'Brien is never going to make it past the Golden Gate Trophy heading east. And they had to blow that up fairly quickly. Philadelphia now with Paul George, Maxey, and Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid, who knows what his health status is going to be. Paul George was going to retire a Pacer, and then he was totally at home in Oklahoma City, and then he was going to bring a championship to the Clippers, and I do like Paul George. But the reality is you've got 2 years, and then all of a sudden that contract is going to be inflated, and you're up against it, and you're having to move pieces again. The advantage for the Indiana Pacers is because they aren't necessarily involved in the big-time free agent splash, get-to max contract free agent guys. They have to do it rather organically and growing it in-house, and that means younger pieces, James, and that means Indiana window is probably 4 or 5 years, and the other teams that we're talking about, window is 2 to 3, because when you are putting literally 80% of your payroll into 5% of your roster, you're putting yourself up against it where you've got a short amount of time to cash in. And I think there is more, if not as much, but I think more optimism from a fan base about the 5-year future of the Indiana Pacers than there is, say, in Philadelphia or whatever. They're happy right now, but they also know they're going to have a totally different conversation in 2 years.
I think that's fair. I will add, though, that a lot of the new CBA rules have kind of changed how you can build teams, which is why we're not seeing a lot of the 3-star max player team builds. You just really can't do it anymore due to the CBA and different different limitations within their contracts and stuff like that. I can't get into the weeds because
you can't go out and you have to have somebody in-house first, and then you can go out and get the other two pieces for sure. You can't go out. It's not like the days where you can just go out and Wild Wild West spin. But look at Philly, though. Philly was still able because they had in-house, right?
Yeah, that helps. Like Tyrese Maxey being a superstar draft pick for them kind of helped them get around some of the new CBA rules that limit your spending and how much you can spend on your star players and things like that. So to your point, Jake, I think that's like the one exception right now. Because you look around the league right now, there are no more big threes, really. They tried it with Phoenix. Phoenix is maybe the other one, and it's failed miserably.
And that goes back to what I'm saying. It is the correct. Like that the big threes were advantage lifestyle market, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Advantage lifestyle and big city market. And what I'm saying is that era, those that have it now have about a 2-year window, and then that thing is starting to dissolve and go back to the style and the architecture that the Indiana Pacers have been forced before other teams to deal with and to understand and to build.
So here's a question for you. Do you like the 2 or 3 year window that maybe Philly has, or do you really think the Pacers have a longer window than 2 or 3 years themselves?
No, what I'm saying is if I was in Philly, sure, I would be very excited about the fact that they are going to be a legit contender. But I also know that they have like 2 turns at the roulette wheel. It comes down to this. It comes down to, would you rather you ever go to Vegas and play roulette?
I have not played roulette in Vegas, but I do know what you're talking about.
So when you play roulette, there's 39 numbers on the wheel.
Yeah.
Right? You get to pick, you put your stuff on a number, and if it hits, you win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather have a wheel with 39 numbers and you get 5 spins, or a wheel with 28 numbers and you get 2 spins?
It will be the latter, but here's my argument. So here's my question I'm asking you. Do you think the Pacers have more spins at this? Because I don't. Like, I think that their window is 2 or 3 years right now. Like, I don't see them being, I'm not saying they won't be a contender. I'm not saying this version of them won't be here in 5 years. Like, I don't think that they're going to be.
They're going to have to do some massaging for sure. But what I'm saying is they have pieces that you feel like are, and again, they're going to have to come up with the money to retain some of them. I understand that. But they are not, it is a definitive, I mean, it's a definitive that when you go out and you say we're going to get 2 guys or 3 guys and we're going to bring them in, more often than not, how many times, James, do you see teams that go out and they get 2 pieces and it's like, boom, there you go, bada boom, bada bang, they're going to win the title? There are so many factors that come into play.
Yeah, I was going to say it hasn't happened since Kevin Durant.
Correct.
Before that, it was probably KG and the
I mean, to be
Celtics
fair, I guess the Heat group, right? I mean, to be fair, but
I remember even their first year, they didn't win it their first year.
What I'm saying is, I think and I'm talking even less about a definitive winning a title and more about just being a franchise that the fan base can get behind. And in this market, of anywhere else, in this market, people in this market don't want one-night stands. They want long-term relationships. They want to feel like they are going to Gainbridge Fieldhouse to watch a group of guys that they have some familiarity with, that are part of the community. And I'm not saying that you don't get that but there are definitely guys that you feel like are mercenaries where you're like, this guy's a rental for 2 years and then they're gone. I just think that what sells with this fan base, what engages this market, what gets people invested in the Pacers. It was great when you look at the 2 groups of Pacer teams that we've had that have had multiple cracks at the wheel and really good rosters. They are teams that were here and they knocked. First, they kind of tapped on the door. Then they came back the next year. Then they knocked on the door. Then they came back the next year and they were kicking at it. And that continuous build is what got people totally invested and bought in and rallied behind it. And I think people here are excited about the fact that this is a group that they feel like they're going to be able to watch take multiple approaches to the door because they have younger players and you can get to know them a little bit as opposed to just rentals.
Right. But here's another, I guess, devil's advocate question, because I'm in a devilly mood today. And if, Eddie, you can feel free to chime in too as an Indiana guy. Hired mercenary was Kawhi Leonard with Toronto, and they won it. He was there for 1 year. They won it. He left. They got to the mountaintop. Would you want that as a Pacers fan? Like, would you want, this is hypothetical, but would you want, like, hey, let's have this 1 crack or 2 cracks at really winning a championship, or being pretty good and
endearing? If you said, look, you can get, like right now the Pacers, you can get Luka Doncic for a year or, Jason Tatum for a year. I mean, of course they're going to do that. But I'm saying realistically speaking, for Indiana, if that is not a viable option, then the advantage that they have in the roster building is this is a roster that I'm telling you, people in this market got introduced to this past year, starting with probably the in-season tournament. And now, and in terms of what sells in Indianapolis, this is what sells. This is how we know how to do it. This is what we are familiar with. Of course, if the Pacers could go out and they're just going to sign, who's the best player in the game right now? Doncic, Tatum, Giannis, if he's healthy, insert
Joker.
name, Jokic, whatever. Sure, if they could sign that guy for 1 year and it gets them a title, of course everybody here is going to sign up for it. But that is for the most part the anomaly, right?
Right. No, that's fair.
And what happened to Toronto and yes, if you're talking championship, James, that's a no-brainer. But what happened with Toronto? They got Kawhi Leonard. Everybody knew that it was short-term. Granted, it paid off for them, right? But then they're right back to the drawing board.
But Golden State was missing Clay and KD against Toronto in the finals.
Yeah, but I also feel like, and then that year, obviously injuries factored in a lot more than others. But I feel like every year we could always be like, well, this team was hurt or this team was banged up. We did it ourselves with the Pacers. Probably,
and certainly you have to assess with the Indiana Pacers whether or not their trip to the Eastern Conference Finals is organic or is it because of attrition in the rest of the league. I mean, that's a fair statement for sure.
So my question to you is, do you think that, and I've struggled, I've gone back and forth with this even in my own head, are the Pacers, have they lost ground in the Eastern Conference Finals race, in the Eastern Conference Finals standing, Eastern Conference contending?
Well, the interesting thing, there's a funny aspect of that because it's a fair question.
It's a hard one for me.
But there's one thing that we forget with that. There's a major answer to that we forget about. And I'll tell you what that is, and we'll talk to Jared Weiss from The Athletic about the shift of the Eastern Conference, and we'll ask him that exact same question. He covers the Boston Celtics, knows a little bit about Eastern teams that are really darn good, and whether or not others have caught up in the left lane running alongside Boston, or is Boston still out in front of the pack? That discussion next. In talking about whether or not the Pacers have lost ground in the East, James, by no stretch of the imagination am I pretending that this guy is like the end-all be-all player, but it is very easy to forget that when assessing Indiana, and granted, this is another curveball that we don't know how it works out, but you forget that a guy who is capable of having games where he leads them in scoring and was a starter / first guy off the bench scorer for them, certainly an integral part of what they were doing over the course of the majority of the season, wasn't even with them in the postseason in Benedict Mathurin. And so that's the one aspect that when you look at it and you go, well, these other teams that were contending in the East are either A, getting healthy, or B, adding pieces. You forget that to an extent, so too is Indiana in that group, because you have young players. We still don't know what Jarris Walker is. Ben Shepherd is going to get, obviously his minutes are probably going to be limited with Mathurin back into the mix, but at least you know that he has experience as opposed to a second-year guy that's getting his first real run, etc. So you have to look at that from Indiana's perspective. But in terms of the others, Philly, Milwaukee, obviously now, assuming that they get healthy. New York, even though they just lost one of their key pieces in the postseason, in Hartenstein, now going to Oklahoma City. A lot going on in the East. Joining us now on the program, he joins us on the CarX Tire and Auto Guest line. He is a writer covering the Boston Celtics for The Athletic. Jared Weiss on the program. Jared, did you get a chance to exhale at all in what I'm sure was a flurry run there in covering the NBA champions?
Yeah, they went through it pretty smoothly. I mean, their toughest challenge was the Pacers, who they swept. So it was probably one of the relatively smoothest playoff runs we've seen in a very long time. So I've been able to pace my breath pretty decently so far this spring and summer.
So let's begin the conversation by asking you about from that Indiana perspective, because, basically the Pacers could hang a banner if they want, like finished third, got to the conference finals, lost to the champion. But when you really look at Indiana, and then you look at what you presume to be the others in the East. Everybody talks about Philly, New York, obviously Boston, that goes without saying, and Milwaukee. Do you see Indiana as a viable contender to be able to get back to, at minimum, that same situation next year in the East?
I think Indiana is probably going to be a top half of the East team for sure, which I think is pretty commensurate with where they were last year. Both the Pacers and the Celtics were beneficiaries of just how beat up the East was throughout the playoff run, and that cleared a lot of the path for them. And then, frankly, the thing that's so confusing with the Pacers is which version of the team is better? Is it the team where they don't have Halliburton and they're very defensive-oriented and they're able to play a little bit inside out? Or do they need to find that blend while also relying on, one of the best playmakers in the NBA in Halliburton? So I think for Indiana, their big question mark is really figuring out how do they balance the different identities that they have to kind of maximize their potential. And if they're able to do that, that puts them right up there, I think, with all these other teams.
Well, I'll just say this, Jared. The version that Pacers fans want to see is the one with Halliburton healthy. The hamstring gave everyone anxiety here in Indianapolis for a little while. But I will ask you this. I know you pinned a story, I believe went live today on The Athletic about, the Celtics' quest to stay on top amid all the changes in the East. And what does a team like them do when you've won it all? Your core is young, but obviously with the new CBA, things are different now. You can't exactly run it back 100% like you probably want to. So what are some of the tweaks that we can look forward to with the Celtics to maximize whatever window they have?
Well, so it's funny you're saying that because I do agree with the premise that the CBA has made it untenable to run it back, and yet the Celtics are running it back. They somehow they're the rare champion that doesn't really have any free agents that were in the core rotation that are on their way out the door. And if you look at what's happening with Denver right now, it's like Denver has lost two really important guards to their core in consecutive seasons. And that's what usually happens with these championship teams. And the Celtics, I think, because they've developed a lot of their rotation through the draft over the years, and then they were able to bring in guys who were ready to sign extensions and get that done, they're in a really interesting position where they don't have to break their team apart just because of contracts running out and guys wanting more money. It's really just a matter of can they Could they tolerate not just the financial implications, but then the basketball implications of being in the second apron? And it seems like they're willing to test that as far as humanly possible, because all signs are that they're going to offer Derek White the max extension that they can. Jason Tatum will obviously get the super max deal. And they have Sam Hauser that they still have to lock up, and that'll be interesting. They at least have him locked in for one more year. But like the Celtics could keep this entire team together for the foreseeable future, which would be a pretty unique opportunity for a championship team.
So, Jared, to follow up on that, as far as the team building goes, obviously a guy who deserves a ton of credit is Brad Stevens, Zionsville native, very familiar around here, obviously with the success at Butler. Back when he moved to the front office, did you all envision that he would be this good, I guess, at the job? Because it seems like, him and others, deserve credit as well. But him in that front office really, took a bunch of swings and hit a bunch of home runs with a lot of the moves that they made.
Yeah, I was always very optimistic about Brad's potential as a GM, because what made him so good as a coach was his intellect, or his emotional intelligence, his ability to understand his players, and his ability to kind of process them emotionally and help them stay, help them feel understood, help them grow, all that kind of stuff. And that's really what a lot of the job as a GM is. It's not just the scouting. It's not just the drafting. It's also like helping keep an organization balanced throughout the course of a season. And that's something that he did a great job of setting the tone from the top and managing, empowering Joe Mazzulla to do that as well. And that was the strength that the Celtics had last year, was their consistency and their versatility on and off the court.
Jared, it's interesting because Jared Weiss, by the way, is our guest from The Athletic, who covers the Boston Celtics. He's on the CarX Tire and Auto guest line. From an Indiana standpoint, Brad Stevens has obviously been linked or rumored with the Indiana job every single time there's an opening. And we know that Indiana's made overtures on numerous occasions to Brad Stevens. We know how obviously that's gone. Brad Stevens is in Boston. This last year was the first time since Brad Stevens departed Butler that people, truthfully, that I trust to know, have said not that he is interested in leaving Boston, but it's the first time that they thought there was the possibility that he would now start to explore it. And that had nothing to do with them winning the championship, just in terms of timing and his itching for the college game perhaps growing stronger. What's the Boston standpoint of that opinion?
That has not come up in a while. It's really been a while since that's happened. I think, for one, I think he's getting compensated pretty well so that they don't have to worry about getting outbid.
What do you think he makes?
I honestly am not sure, but I think it's double digits.
I mean, if Indiana was going to pay him, let's say Indiana wanted to pay him $10 to $15 million a year.
I don't think they might come close to what Boston's paying, or they might be able to outbid Boston, but it doesn't sound like it would be some sort of drastic, life-changing event for him. I think for him, it would probably be mostly just where is he and his family happy, and that, I think that was kind of the whole impetus behind him getting into the front office. Was he got really burnt out from coaching in the bubble. He wanted to spend more time with his young family. I mean, he's got one son that's heading off to college now. But he's someone that I think really wanted the work-life balance of being a front office person, which, as he put it to me, it's a grind, but it's a different grind.
Right.
And
you're right. I mean, it's one where you're home at 6 o'clock, right? Or 8 o'clock, whatever. But you're home.
Yeah, and he can sit in the luxury box and watch the games with his family, as opposed to being down there on the floor. Like he gets more of that time. And I also think that if you're a college coach nowadays, you're more of a GM than ever, in addition to being a coach. I'd imagine that the workload is even harder now for these coaches. So, being on the recruiting trail during the summer, it just doesn't seem like it fits with what he's looking for. But you could also say at the same time, now that he's been, doing this for a while now and he's gotten away from the coaching, hey, maybe the itch to coach is back. But I don't see him leaving this position to go take over a college program.
So, Jared, I do want to jump in here. You talk about coaches. Joe Mazzulla, I had my few interactions with him throughout the Pacers series against them, and he is, and I mean this as a compliment, he's the weirdest coach I've probably ever been around at that level. So what was it like to cover a coach that unique? And I mean that in all, again, sincerity.
I love it. He and I are very similar. We get along on a lot of the stuff that I think people would find crazy. And when I say similar, I mean in our viewpoint. I'm not able to take a pounding in jiu-jitsu for 3 hours at a time. So he's got me beat there in many other ways too. But I found him to be, I think, the most fascinating, maybe the most fascinating person I've ever covered, honestly. He is just he's endlessly curious. He's endlessly competitive. He pulls inspiration from so many places in life. I think his creativity, it's not completely novel, but I think the way he goes about it is extremely rare in an NBA setting. And it's been a very different experience. And especially after Ime Udoka, who was his predecessor, Ime was very quiet and low key. It was also the year that he was in Boston. There was still not much access. It was still kind of just post-COVID. So with Mazzulla, it's been just a totally different experience from the coaches that I've covered in the past, and it's been really enjoyable.
I'm curious to this, Jared. There's a Boston restaurant. What's the hottest, biggest? I know Cheers is the one everybody mentions, but what's truly like the most popular, hottest table, hard to get to place for Bostonians?
I mean, nobody from Boston has ever been to Cheers. Cheers is a tourist trap that I don't think I've ever set foot in Cheers. What would be the? Oh, that's a good question. I mean, in Boston, there's a new place every single year, basically.
Okay, let's say there's a place called Jared's. Jared's opens up. It's the hot restaurant. Everybody's talking about it. It's the buzz. It's the place to be, and everybody is packed. There's the place is, and this is not you, but Bostonians have to vote on this. There's literally one table left for the evening, and lined up outside, waiting, trying to get a table, are Larry Bird, Bill Russell, if he was still with us, Jason Tatum, Brad Stevens, and Kevin McHale, and Tom Brady. Who gets the table?
It's Tom Brady.
Okay,
right?
so
I mean, he's the GOAT in town for sure.
Among Celtics, who gets the table?
Tom Brady. Oh, Celtics fans or actual people with the Celtics?
No, amongst those that I just mentioned that are Celtics related.
Jeez. I mean, well, if the ghost of Bill Russell shows up, I feel like people would be more amenable to him. But Larry Bird is he's I think been the face of the franchise generally for most people born in the last 75 years, or I guess last 50 years, I would say.
It is amazing, man. I mean, the guy hasn't played there in how long, and yet he is still. I get it, right? I totally get it. That there's just, that was the point I was trying to make. Is he is still, when he goes back to Boston, he is still he is a walking legend in Boston, correct?
Well, I would say yes, but I also can't remember the last time I saw him in Boston. He's pretty much disappeared ever since I've been around the team.
Eddie, do you have the breaking news sound already?
I mean, it was only going to happen because you came on to talk to us about it, but from the other company that we usually kind of rival against, Derek White got his deal. So, yeah, I'm sure you probably had your pre-write written on that already. And if you got to go, I understand. But, yeah, Derek White, 4 years, $126 million extension, according to Woj. A formality, Jared, I'm assuming?
Yeah, for me, everything I heard was that the Celtics are going to make the offer. It's just a matter of, is he going to accept it or is he going to try to hit free agency? But every indication that he's given has been that he wants to stay in Boston. He wants to, probably spend the rest of his career there. And this is completely unsurprising. So
here's a joke for you, and it's actually kind of serious, but is Derek White the best player in the NBA who airballs 1-3 a game? Because in the playoffs, I swear, he airballs a 3 every game.
I feel like Steph Curry also airballs 3s once a game, doesn't he?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We get him up like he does. I guess, you're bound to miss one kind of bad. But I just find it funny that, he shoots so well, but there's always one shot where I'm like, what the heck just happened there? And then, he makes up for it. So not a big deal.
Hey, credit to Derek. When he got to Boston, he didn't want to shoot. He just wanted to pass the ball, and now he gets heat checks up all the time.
This is true.
Look, Derek White to me is the kind of player you want, Jared, because he is a guy that certainly on nights when it is necessary or needed can get you, 20. He can lead you in scoring 25, 20, whatever. But when he is on the floor with the others, he is still going to get his points, but you don't have to orchestrate through him. In other words, he is able to figure out and do things that contribute without necessarily being a frontline guy. And that, to me, I think championship teams oftentimes are defined by who guys 3 and 4 are as opposed to 1 and 2. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And he was, I mean, what made the Celtics special is you couldn't even really say who is 3 or 4 on that team. It really changed on a nightly basis. It changed over the course of a series, and that's what made them special.
I do want to ask this, Jared. Do you think, and I know Jason Tatum is very happy. They accomplished the ultimate goal. They won a championship. But similar to a Steph Curry, when you don't have the finals MVP, you don't have the, I guess, top dog label as far as the playoffs go. Is that the new goal for him? I don't know if have you had a chance to talk to him about, next season just yet, but is that the overall theme going into next year, or how does he view maybe being the second fiddle to Jaylen Brown?
I don't think anyone sees him as second fiddle. I think, what's nice about the way that played out is that so much of the public always saw it as Jaylen as a second fiddle.
Mm-hmm.
It was the validation that Jaylen got during the postseason. It really kind of helped put them on even ground and kind of give the perception of their relationship the balance that it needed in the public eye. But they've always done a pretty good job, I think, of respecting each other in that way. And whatever outside perceptions that there were, I think that in the last few years they've pretty much tried to poo-poo it. And they understand that they have different roles on the team. And I think a big part of why Jason is perceived to be the top dog on the team is that he's the main playmaker. And he's the one with the ball in his hands most of the time. And he's often the one that they go to create shots in, late clock situations. And so that's generally the person the team that everybody perceives to be the main guy, which I would agree with. But Jaylen, and the way that he plays and the different role that he fills compared to Jason most of the time is instrumental for Jason to be able to be who he is. And they really do rely on each other and each other's style of play to be able to maximize their own strengths.
Jared Weiss of The Athletic. Hang on just a second.
Sorry, I thought that was the sounder you wanted. I'm sorry.
Jared Weiss of The Athletic. Appreciate the time. I know it's busy with the Derek White news, so we will let you get back to work, but appreciate the time and perspective today. Talk to you soon, all right?
Sure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Jared Weiss covers the Boston Celtics for The Athletic. Now that you played the breaking news sounder, I will tell you, Eddie, the breaking news is CarX Tire and Auto, now Express Pro Tire and Auto. So from now on, those that join us, I've forgotten that today is July 1st. I knew on July 1st they were undergoing a name change, but today is, in fact, the 1st of July. So Jared just joined us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. We are happy to have, again, same great service, same great company, new name, Express Pro Tire and Auto, and the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. We'll continue the conversation about the Pacers and something kind of exciting that happened yesterday that is absolutely perfect for summertime. I'll let you know what that is when we come back. It's Query & Company on a Monday, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. One of the better concerts I've been to in a while, right here. Little Tears for Fears, right?
Yeah.
Good show. I saw a good show last night. You guys ever been to Rock the Ruins?
I have not.
It's in Holiday Park, and last night they had I ended up with tickets to go see Band of Horses. Not overly familiar with them, but I'm like, you know what? It's a nice night. Let's go. And so we went. My buddy Byron, Eddie, you're familiar with Byron, right?
Yes.
And what happens with Byron anytime we go anywhere? Are you familiar with that?
Yes, the keys get lost or something of that
wallet,
nature.
right?
Yeah.
So I get us tickets, and we go there, and Byron says, and we walk in, and it's like, hey, let's go get Cokes, beers, whatever. So we get up to the concession area, and I'm standing there next to Byron, and he looks at me and says, look, you got the tickets. I'll go ahead and get the drinks. And I go, okay, cool. And he goes, what do you guys want? And so I tell him what Shannon and I want, and he orders his. So we turn around, and we're walking away, and he goes, you know what? I'm sorry. I totally forgot to get your drinks, too. Dude, I was standing right next to you the whole time. So we have to get back in line because by then other people have moved up, so we get back in line. So then we get that. Then we sit down, and then later he says, I'll be right back. I'm going to go get one more round. So he gets up and leaves, comes back 10 minutes later and goes, I left my phone here, I think, and it's got my wallet on it. Have you guys seen it?
Oh, my gosh.
What are we doing here? I got to buy one of those little bracelet things for him. But the
He needs
concert was good.
He needs an air tag.
He does, man.
I was gonna
He
say,
definitely needs an
like,
AirTag.
this sounds like every excuse. You sure he's not just like messing with you?
Trust me. Trust me. I sit around with him. I want to eat Ritalin like Skittles. But it was a great show, and that is a very cool setup. If you've not seen a show put on at Rock the Ruins, it's very cool, and they do a number of different cool bands that come through there. Last night was perfect for it. But yesterday in the daytime, it was perfect as well because, summertime, and obviously I think that's a big part of why both Major League Baseball and then some of the soccer tournaments are popular because, you're looking for something to watch through the course of the day, even though it was a gorgeous day yesterday. And how about the Fever game last night? I thought, James, I watched that game. That's a big win for them in Phoenix against a quality opponent and one that was kind of, I think, benchmarked because of the Diana Taurasi preseason comments about Caitlin Clark. And then, of course, you have Brittany Griner, and it gets physical. But don't look now. But it's easy to look at their record and kind of poo-poo it. But if you look at where they started to where they are now and the fact that there was an integration period that had to take place, especially with the way that Caitlin Clark plays, don't look now, but they're playing pretty well. And I think they're starting to figure things out, and it's pretty enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, that game was really good. I was locked into it. They got their teeth kicked in to start the game by the Mercury. Got their teeth kicked in again in the third quarter, going down 15, but they fought back into it. And it was their best win of the season, their signature win of the season so far, because they finally beat a team with a winning record, which they hadn't done so far. And I thought that there was a little bit of everything in that game. Caitlin Clark came out, had some brutal turnovers to start the game, just some bad decisions on her part, but she bounced back and obviously had a fantastic performance. 15 points, 12 assists, 9 rebounds, one rebound shy of the first triple-double by a rookie in WNBA history. I know some fans and people were mad that she got taken out at the end of the game and didn't get the extra rebound. Who cares? They won. Let the stuff happen organically. It's not that big of a deal. But I thought she was huge.
While playing under the weather.
I know. I was going to add that. The migraines and stuff like that. Like, I couldn't tell.
You know what's interesting about that when you're under the weather? I thought about this yesterday, and I thought, this is how my brain works at times. If you are under the weather and you are running a temperature, that means that you have a what?
Fever.
Thank you. And if you have a fever and you're trying to gather what your temperature is, you put the thermometer in your mouth, and then you look for the little ink to rise, and that is actually technically inside the thermometer. That's what.
I'm not doing this.
Do you know, James?
I'm not doing that either.
Eddie, go ahead, please.
I'm not doing it.
Come on, please.
Mercury.
Yeah, it's the mercury. Now, what are the odds of that, right? You got the fever and the mercury. I mean, what really?
Ha ha.
And yet I felt great watching it. Pacers have some decisions to make, maybe, and we'll let you know what those are and how things that have happened over the course of the weekend might impact that decision process, that discussion next. to speed with some of the changes that have taken place with NBA free agency and those that are moving on up, if you will. Paul George is a fascinating one to me because James Boyd, and by the way, James Boyd in for Jimmy Cook today. Eddie Garrison here as well. My name is Jake Query.
Hello.
It is Query and Company on The Fan. I think Paul George is a wonderful player, and he is the perfect type of player, for example, that not only could be a real difference maker for Indiana, but in reality, he is the perfect player in terms of his skill set that would be a difference maker for a lot of people because he is just the prototype of what today's NBA looks for. You know, a long wing that can guard, that can hit threes, that can score off the dribble. And he got a 4-year deal with Philadelphia after the Clippers, for example, had offered him 3. And I think he was really looking for that 4th year. And that kind of goes back to the conversation we had about Pascal Siakam of a player reaches a certain age where, as a franchise, you want to limit the number of years you're committed because you just don't know what happens in terms of the longevity of production for that player after a certain age. But George signing with Philly is the big story. They also, by the way, signed Eric Gordon, the former IU star, $3.3 million. So, he's in the twilight of his career, obviously, but a guy that can still shoot the ball from the outside. There's always going to be a place for that.
Yes, and a guy who destroyed Michael Jordan's sons. Let's not forget.
That's right, on ESPN, right?
Yep.
Isaiah Hartenstein signs with Oklahoma City. That I don't think was overly surprising. The amount he got is really good. 3-year, $87 million deal. Jalen Smith, the former Pacer, who had declined his option, signing a 3-year, $27 million deal with the Chicago Bulls. Let's go back to Philly in terms of does that now, assuming Joel Embiid stays healthy, they already have Tyrese Maxey, of course, and they extended him over $200 million, and now they add Paul George. So you've got Philly, you've got Boston, New York. You forget Julius Randle's going to be healthy for the Knicks, so you add in with what New York has done in terms of some of the moves that they have made. For Indiana, with the pieces that it has, James, in terms of Andrew Nembhard, Jarris Walker, Ben Shepherd, for that matter, because we forget that Benedict Matherin's coming back, the Pacers are going to have some decisions to make as well. Not necessarily right now on the front burner, but Andrew Nembhard is a good example. You know, the thought was that Nembhard would be extended pretty soon here because of the way he played. But if you're Andrew Nembhard, it might be in your best decision to hold off on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're the Pacers, you're definitely trying to lock them down now because it's cheaper for you. And obviously you want to try to capitalize on that. But if I'm Andrew Nembhard and I'm seeing the amount of money that role players are getting, if I have one more good season, I'm going to break the bank as far as where I was drafted and what my value is now. Because we have to remember he was a 2nd-round pick. At the time, I believe he got like the most guaranteed money ever for a 2nd-round pick. And everyone was like, oh, man, that's a lot of money. He's going to get a lot more if he can put together another season where he shows that he can be essentially a starting guard in the NBA, and a very good one, because there were times throughout the playoffs where obviously when Tyrese Halliburton went down, it was even more so the case, but he was relied on to run the offense, to score the ball, to distribute the ball, to play good defense, and he did it all at a pretty high level and did it very efficiently too. So Andrew Nembhard is a player that, I know he was older coming out of college, I had played, I believe, 4 years at college, and he's someone who's kind of proven that, your path is your path. A lot of these guys, even now this past NBA draft, you want to draft somebody because they're young and they have all this upside. Sometimes if you just draft a good player, that's a good thing. He's a really good player. He's still young as far as NBA terms go. And I know that he's probably excited to continue to see these big contracts handed out. But now I think about it, and Eddie brought this up, I believe, before we even came on air today, I'm not signing anything if I'm him. Because you have to think, too, unless you have like a catastrophic injury, there's still going to be some team that's probably going to overpay for you, even if you don't have like another great season. You just have to have you just can't have a season where you're really bad. But if he just comes back and has like an average season, he's going to get paid.
What would you say is the Andrew Nembhard at this point? His market value is what? Now, I'm not saying what the Pacers would pay. I'm saying his market value. Because are there teams, James, and I do think that this is possible. There are two kinds of players in the NBA to me. There are great players, and there are players that are situationally great. And by that I mean, I think there are some guys that you go out and you get that player, and then you look at it and you go, you know what? He was really good at his last stop, but now we realize it kind of was the situation that made him really good, and the fact that he wasn't necessarily on radars, and you know, defenses were focused on Halliburton, or they were focused on Siakam, or they were focused on whatever, and Nembhard just kind of kept making plays, and now all of us, and then people go out and get him and build that up, and you realize, you know, the Alvin Harper effect, right? Where, gosh, I don't know that he was necessarily the guy that was. I don't think that's the case with Nembhard. I'm using that generically as an example. Are there teams that are still going to be hesitant about it, saying he was really good in Indiana, but I'm not certain that he is going to be necessarily, that means that he's going to translate as a mainline player for us?
I think that's a fair statement, because in my opinion, there are maybe 30 guys in the NBA, 35 that you can throw on any team, and you say that they're going to be that player in that environment, or they're going to get theirs. I don't know if he's one of them, but I will add that Andrew is, or he seems like, I don't know because he hasn't been on a different team, but he seems like a pretty malleable player. It's not like he's a super high maintenance player. It's not like he's a super high usage guy either. He's a pretty good player with the reps and the opportunities he's been given. And then obviously we saw his usage rate and his production and overall, I thought like his overall best basketball when Tyrese Halliburton went down and he was the guy. And he proved that he could be a guy. And I'm not saying he could be somebody you rely on for 82 games in the regular season and he's your focal point of your franchise. But I do think there's something to be said, Jake, about stepping up in the biggest moments of the playoffs and not flinching at all.
Oh, no question.
Like the dude, he showed that he's got, some heart or something that you really can't teach as far as being ready for the moment.
He's the guy that I've always said, James, my patented line. I mean, he's one aspirin from a coma all the time, right? I mean, the guy is just literally unflappable. He's just even keel. Like he that shot that he hit, and I can't recall. I guess
the Milwaukee series. I believe it was like Game 3 or something like that.
Was it Milwaukee or New York series?
That was
where he hit like literally the 40-footer.
I believe it was Milwaukee.
Yeah. I mean, I watched him. He hit that shot, and he turns around to go back to the bench, and he takes about 3 steps, and then he kind of breaks the end of like this small grin, almost like he looked at his teammates like, yeah, I didn't think so either, but that's cool. And that was literally the total emotion that he showed.
That's how he is. I mean, he's the same guy. This is getting into the weeds. When he posts on Instagram, he has no caption. And so it's like he doesn't talk at all, it seems like. I'm like, what does his voice sound like? He's over with Team Canada right now getting ready for the Olympics. And I'm like, can this guy speak? What does his voice sound like? Who is he?
I've met him once. I was at Starbucks, ironically.
Oh, were you getting your chai tea?
I can't remember what I was doing there that time, but I went inside. It was for something different. I think I was meeting somebody there, and I was just waiting for my drink. And he sits right down next to me. He goes, "Hey, man, how long you been here?" And we just struck up a 10-minute convo just like that.
Did you say, by the way, I'm the producer for the Pacers
I
Radio
did bring
Network?
that up, yeah. He goes, "Oh, that's cool."
Did you mention?
Did he mean it was cool, or did you just say that because he had?
Did you say I also work for Querying Company? Would you like to be in the company?
See, this was before Querying Company.
Okay.
So don't be trying to come and get some of his shine, Jake. Okay, I see what you're doing. You're
That's
angling.
right.
You're angling to take away my boy's shine. Eddie, you earned that. That is your spotlight, solo spotlight right there.
So he asked how long you were there because the line was long, or he was just making conversation because you were friendly, or how long did it take him to ask what size hat you wear?
Never came up in conversation.
See, that's a hater. That's
because
a hater. Okay?
I was sitting down, and then he ordered his drink. He sat down. He sat down for a little bit. He went up and got his drink, and mine still hadn't come out yet.
Ah.
So he sat right back down next to me and then was enjoying his
Now here's the better question.
drink.
When you looked at the side of his cup, did he tell them that his name was Andrew or Drew?
I don't remember.
I think he goes by Drew, does he not, James?
He does, from what I have heard, teammates and others, but I haven't been around him enough to say definitively what I would call him. Usually I just I call him Drew. I drop syllables for anybody because I feel like it's just easier to get it, especially when you're in a scrum. Or talk to somebody, like it's easier to get somebody's attention when you just can say Ty instead of Tyrese. Like Tyrese, the Reese part might get you cut off or trampled when someone else is asking a question. So I'm a name syllable dropper.
Okay, so you're a monosyllabic fan.
Whatever that word means, yes.
Okay. Now, Andrew Nemhard is, along with Benedict Mathurin, representing Team Canada right now,
Right.
getting ready for the Olympics. Zach Edey has declared that he will not do that because he is prepping himself for the NBA. You were surprised that Zach Edey went inside the top 10, correct?
Yes, I was surprised. And I was surprised because he is not the modern big man. He's a traditional kind of old school throwback player. Not saying he's not a good player and he's not a first round talent. I just thought that a top 10 pick was very shocking. And I don't really know too many people who, really study drafts and big boards and stuff like that who had Zach Edey going over Khalil Ware from IU. So I was a bit surprised.
I don't know about that. I think a lot of people thought that was going to take place. I mean, Khalil Ware, I think the narrative has been, Khalil Ware is probably the more naturally skilled, but Zach Edey had fewer questions about him. And going into it, I think Edey had played his way. The narrative or the thought was that he was certainly around 12 was going to be his, but Memphis was the one team. I think in this particular draft, James, it came down to Edey benefited from the fact that the draft was void of talent depth enough that in Memphis's case, they decided to simply go with need versus best player, because the best player, you take the best player when it's a really deep draft and there's talent there and you're like, you know what, we just got to take this guy because he's there. And so therefore, but in this particular draft, I don't think that there was enough talent beyond like 5 or 6 where there were can't miss guys. And so, you know what, let's just go with need.
Yeah, I don't really think there was like a can't miss guy in this entire draft,
That's what I mean.
to be honest. Like
Right.
it was that.
I mean, poor Atlanta, of all the years to win the number 1 pick, right?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I had no clue who the number 1 pick was until they picked the guy. And I was like, oh, okay. Like,
Well, the best line somebody said to me the day after the draft was, watching the draft, I felt like an old guy watching the American Music Awards, right? Because you're like, who are these guys?
Yeah.
The vast majority of them. There were a lot of them that you didn't know who they were.
I will say this, though. Zach Edey went to a really good team. I know the Grizzlies were terrible last year, but keep in mind, John Morant.
It's a really good team for him because they took him because that is a need they had, right?
Yeah.
In other words, they're not taking him like, hey, we're going to build a roster around you. They're taking him like, hey, we have a roster. We need you to do A, B, and C.
Yeah, that's my point. They, like I said,
Perfect situation.
John Morant was obviously out because of the suspension, and then he came back and messed up his shoulder. He's out for the season. I don't even think he played 10 games, but they've been, when John Morant has been healthy the last few years, when he's been healthy, they've been in the Western Conference race. They've been in the thick of things. I think they're going to be right back there with the addition of Zach Edey, with the return of John Morant from the shoulder surgery that he had. Obviously, Jaren Jackson Jr., an Indiana guy, is still there as well. So they have some pieces. Desmond Bain, another
It's
Indiana
the Indiana
kid.
Grizzlies. Come on.
That's what it feels like. I mean, everybody who
Jake
was
LaRavia.
somebody, is on their team. So, good situation. I don't think that it's a terrible pick. I will say that. Like, I was shocked by it, but to your point, I've seen people say that it was just a downright horrible pick, worst pick in the draft, and I'm like, not really. Like,
I'm going to go back to, I think, and I could be wrong in this, I think it's safe to say that Zach Edey is never going to be like a 9 or a 10 as a player. But I also don't think he's ever going to fall lower than a 6. So he is a more known commodity than the other. I mean, Khalil Ware is a prime example. Khalil Ware may well be a 10. He also may well be a 2. And the risk factor was higher with other players. And if you're Memphis, you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, we have Memphis's biggest risk, quite frankly, is their best player, right? Wonderful talent, but who knows from one year to the next what sort of things John Morant, in terms of if he's going to be on the floor. They have really good pieces, and they didn't need a lot, but yet they're drafting 9th. So you might as well go with the guy that you feel gives you the best chance to check boxes that you need checked, which was they looked at Edey and said, we like what he can bring to the table as opposed to other players that are probably going to slot behind the guys we already have that you just mentioned, that are good players. Now, Ware is intriguing too, and he also, I think, went to a really good situation. I think Edey and Ware both went to very advantageous situations for their skill set and their approach going into it. And in Khalil Ware's case, I think going to Miami where he can kind of sit, maybe learn behind Bam Adebayo a little bit. I think he plays a little bit different game, although Adebayo has a very Draymond Green level aspect to his game. And by that, I mean the sprinkler. The guy that's kind of there, like, and the ball goes into him, and he can filtrate that basketball into a number of different operating areas for different players on the floor, and it kind of all goes through him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that Ware has that kind of a game per se, but he does have a better around-the-basket scoring ability than probably people realize, and I think he did a good job in the last 6 weeks at Indiana of showcasing that. But he is going into a situation in Miami between Eric Spoelstra and the players that they have that if he is planning on any sort of take days off knuckleheadedness at Miami, it ain't going to fly. So he's in a really good situation to be able to immediately go in and just kind of learn the professionalism that seems to be the one thing that is a stigma against him, even though at Indiana I thought he did a good job of starting to shed that a little bit.
Yeah, I thought he shed it as well, and I think people digging up stuff from beyond the Indiana season where he proved that he can be a professional mindset. He can go out there and he can contribute to the team without distractions. I think people trying to go back beyond that is a bit disingenuous at this point because I try to give, especially young people, grace, knowing that at his age, did I do everything right? Probably not. Did I have the best work ethic? Probably not. And so, to your point, he's in the Pat Riley system now where they don't care down there. Like their calling card, if that's what you want to title it as, is this grit grind. We outwork everybody. No one gave us anything. And every year when Miami is relatively healthy, they usually have like a shot of doing something in the Eastern Conference Final. This past year, Jimmy Butler got hurt in the play-in game, but that's a team that's kind of built off of the misfits and the, outcasts and the castaways and stuff like that. So he's in a good spot. But I think that overall for, the two programs in Indiana obviously being one of them, and then Purdue, you made out pretty good with those draft picks, and then you can sell it obviously to the next class that comes in.
By the way, there's a band called the Misfits, is there not? Do we
I
know
would
that,
not know.
Eddie?
I'm not a band guy.
Isn't there
myself.
a band
I'm
called
not
the
sure.
Misfits? Who are the? There's a band. Isn't the Misfits one of the names that's written inside the
Misfits
point?
is a band, yes.
What year was the Misfits? What year did they hit it big? Does it say?
Would you like to know what genre they are first?
I'm going to guess the Misfits are a punk rock band out of London that started in '81.
Yes. They're primarily known as horror punk.
Yeah, horror punk. That's right.
Yeah.
And what year did they start?
77.
77. Where are they from? It's got to be either L.A. or London.
No.
Are they domestic?
They're from the States.
Okay, I'm going to go with Amityville. They got to be from Amityville if they're in the horror punk, right? That goes without saying.
No.
One last guess. Okay, I'm going to go Milwaukee.
Lodi, New Jersey.
Okay. Have you been to New Jersey?
No.
Everything in New Jersey is horror punk. Believe me. Okay, so you got the Misfits. You got Outkast. That's a band too, right? And then you said the Castaways. Now, is there a band called the Castaways? I think this is a perfect name for a band.
Movie.
Okay, well, what about a band? Is there ever a band called the Castaways? Because if I form a band, I think the Castaways is what I'm going with.
That's
and
a
then
good
if you
name.
think about that, if you got a gig,
It's also a TV show.
and you don't show up for your gig, well, no problem. You're the Castaways. Nobody knows where you are, right? You're gone somewhere, right?
Yes, you're correct. There is a band.
There is a band called the Castaways?
Yes.
All right, we're going to guess where the Castaways are from. What genre? They're indie rock, right?
They are an American rock band.
Okay, American rock band. What year did they hit it big? Does it say what their debut album was?
Years active.
2008, I'm guessing.
Years active, 63 to 68
Oh.
in the 70s to present.
Oh, that's right. Oh, you know what? And my apologies. They're a Motown band, right? They're out of Detroit.
No.
What style of music is it?
Garage rock.
There's no garage rock in the 60s.
Says
What-
genres, garage rock.
Garage rock in the 60s. Okay. Garage rock, then, if they're garage rock out of the 60s, then they are definitively, no question about it, that band's out of Cleveland.
No.
Where are they from?
Minneapolis,
Minneapolis. Okay.
Minnesota.
That makes sense because one of the great restaurants in Minneapolis was Joe's Garage. Great place. They had awesome mashed potatoes, and now it's gone. Maybe that's why. Because they went away.
Have
like
you
the
been to
Castaways
like
came back.
every city in America?
Funny you asked, James. Thank you for asking. I looked up once. I have been to. There are only 2 cities in the top 50 metropolitan areas of the United States that I've not been to. Would you like to guess the 2?
2 in the top 50. I'm gonna go.
One. You want
Omaha?
states? I've been to Omaha.
That was my guess.
That's a good guess. Eddie, you got a guess?
What states you haven't been to?
No. Of the top 50 largest cities in the country, I've been to 48 of the 50. There's only 2 that I've not been to.
Honolulu? It would be something in Hawaii.
Been to Honolulu.
Okay, dang. I'm 0 for 2 now. Those are my 2 guesses.
I covered the Pro Bowl the year of the Peyton Manning liquored up kicker comment about Mike Vanderjagt. Well, we got a liquored up kicker that ran his mouth. I'll deal with it when I get home. I was covering that Pro Bowl.
El Paso.
El Paso's correct, Eddie. Ring the bell.
That is
wow.
wow.
Look at Ed. Look at the big brain on it. How in the world did you know that?
See, I figured.
Unbelievable.
I was going through the mind of my head.
Unbelievable.
I was like, okay, Texas has
If you get the other one, I will buy you dinner for a month.
I was like, I think Texas has like 3 of the largest cities in America.
Here's the thing. If
So I
you
was
get
like,
the other
Austin,
one, I'll take you
check.
right now to Express Pro Tire and Auto and buy you a set of tires for your car.
Oh, they do need a new set.
Okay, well, there you go. Express Pro Tire and
man.
Auto will go there and we'll
Stakes
get it
are
taken
high.
care of.
Stakes are high here.
Okay.
No hints.
Eddie is so proud of himself. The fact you
I know
pulled El
there's
Paso out
like
of
tears
nowhere.
in his eyes right now.
That is incredible.
He's
You
like
see,
he's
that's like-
shining.
I will
That's
give
two
you a
straight-
hint. I'll
that's
give
two
you a hint,
straight-
but now we're down to simply air fresheners at Express Pro Tire and Auto. Which one do you want? You want to take your chance with behind door number 1 and for the tires, or do you want the hint and now you're down to air freshener?
I can't get both. I can't have
I mean,
a
they got
guess then a
everything at
hint.
that
I
place.
can't have a guess then a hint here.
No, I mean not for the. Okay, boom, go. What's your
Okay,
guess
I
for the
want the
tires?
hint.
Boom.
I want the hint then.
Okay. Both geographically and climate aspect, I think of it as similar to El Paso.
Albuquerque.
Ooh, an excellent guess. Excellent guess. And you wasted no time on that. You just pulled up from half court on that one.
I know.
Albuquerque, you may not recall the story that I told.
Oh yes.
I have a couple of great stories about Albuquerque,
Yes.
including going to the house for Breaking Bad where the
Yeah.
lady had a sign
My
in her front
phone.
yard that said,
You did tell me
no effing pictures, no effing questions, do not effing talk to me. And I tried to talk to her, and it did not go well.
You think?
All right, one other one. You got one other?
Phoenix.
Eddie Garrison,
No, I know he's been a
not
Phoenix.
up to speed
Yeah,
on
he's
his IndyCar
Yeah, I was gonna say
history.
he's been a Phoenix. Yeah.
No.
Tucson, Arizona is the other,
See, I wouldn't have
Close.
guessed Tucson, but
Tucson,
that seems
Arizona.
fitting.
That would not have come to mind.
and University of Arizona was an it school when I was in school, and I knew several people that went there. And Kathy Frisch went to Arizona to visit when I was a junior and brought back a University of Arizona sweatshirt, and it was my favorite article of clothing until somebody stole it my freshman year of college, and I've been bitter ever since.
I'm getting better
But
at
I've never
impressing
been to
you.
Tucson. What's that?
I'm getting better at impressing you.
That was, I mean, I'm telling you what, the fact you pulled El Paso, that was unbelievable. We're going to talk Indiana Fever. We're going to do it with somebody that covers them. They had a big game yesterday. Speaking of not Tucson, but Phoenix. That was where the Fever yesterday got their first win over a team with a winning record. And Matt Byrne covers them for Clutch Points, joins us on the other side. Indiana Fever, big win yesterday. Covering the Fever for Clutch Points, Matt Byrne, who is an Indiana Fever reporter. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line to talk about exactly that. Matt, that was one yesterday where obviously the Mercury got out to a quick lead. Indiana kept trying to get it inside of like 5, couldn't do so, and then ends up getting a win over, for the first time, a plus 500 team. I guess first question would be this. Did you feel like the Fever schematically made some changes in the way that they were approaching over the course of that game, or was it rather just a matter of kind of staying the course of what they were doing and letting it play itself out?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it's a little bit of both. Caitlin Clark in the first quarter, even maybe into the second quarter, was just forcing way too many passes when plays weren't really going anywhere, and Aaliyah Boston, Temi Fagbenle were running really well in transition, really giving Caitlin a target, and I really think that that's kind of settled her down a little bit. And then in the end, they just started making 3-pointers. I mean, you can't shoot 1 for 12 in the first half and expect to win games. And in the second half, Kelsey Mitchell got going. Leah Boston, in crunch time. Katie Lou Samuelson in crunch time hit some. Even Melissa Smith hit a lot of big 3-pointers to keep them in the game, and that's eventually what won it for them.
Matt, when you look at the things that Caitlin has been able to do this season, 1 rebound shy of the first triple-double by a rookie in WNBA history, obviously the 15, 5, and 5, and other stats that I'm probably forgetting, how have you seen her become more comfortable, or maybe even, I mean, I don't know if yesterday was comfortable with Kalia Copper, Gardner, but how have you seen her just adjust to the WNBA speed, physicality, things of that nature?
Yeah, I think that has been really prevalent in these last set of games. I mean, the opponents have been a little bit easier, but I would definitely agree with you, James, because, it's not always going to be easy for her. Copper was picking her up 94 feet, really making her uncomfortable. That's what I mentioned where she was forcing the passes. But I do think that in these last 4 to 5 games, there has been a pattern where Caitlin at times has tried to force the spectacular pass after making one and trying to keep doing that. And I think in real time we've been able to really see her settle down and get these really impressive performances with the points, the rebounds, assists. I think it's an incredible sign for the franchise moving forward that she's settling in. It's going to be really interesting to see how her game progresses into the second half of the season.
We knew at the beginning of the season that the Fever schedule was going to be an arduous one, and that it was going to be choppy there in the beginning. They got off to a slow start, clearly, put themselves in a huge hole, but they've won 5 of 7. There was so much pressure on Christie's sides and just were they misusing Caitlin Clark, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess to use last night's game as a microcosm of that, have the Fever made a lot of adjustments over the course of the season, or was this strictly as simple as learning each other, figuring it out, and continuing and being consistent in their approach and trying to do what they needed to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just – I think the main thing is that they're learning each other, which is only helping Caitlin as the distributor get more comfortable with each and every player, which I think – I mean, this is the job of the point guard. It's the job of the point guard to make everybody better around you, and I think that she is starting to do that. So, yeah, I don't know if it was just – the Fever really changing the schemes a lot. It's just you see Aaliyah Boston, get more confident, and that just opens up a realm of possibilities for her setting good high ball screens, for Caitlin to pull up from 3. The pick and roll has been really good as of lately. So I think you can see that this team is starting to get to know each other better, and it's showing on the floor. I definitely think so.
So, Matt, I was watching the game when they had their after timeout, their ATO play where Kelsey Mitchell comes off the screen, hits the dagger jumper, and I'm thinking, Christy Sides, you deserve your flowers. So what has been – how have you seen her embrace, grow, change, and deal with these changes throughout the season, the spotlight when it comes to being the head coach of the Indiana Fever, which obviously in turn means being the head coach of the biggest star probably in basketball right now.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely cannot be easy for her to be a head coach in that limelight, just as much as, Caitlin Clark has had to undergo so many media responsibilities. It almost seems like daily. It probably can be easy for a head coach of a franchise that's still in a rebuild, that is still kind of expected to produce pretty solid results, just with the number of top picks that they've had lately. But I think that was great. I mean, I think that as much as we're talking about the growth of the team, I think that was that play call that you were talking about is just definitely a growth of sides of just late game coaching, realizing that Kelsey Mitchell was on fire and realizing that Kelsey, 40 seconds earlier had hit a big time shot. So drawing up the play there right in the mid range, that's, Kelsey Mitchell's bread and butter. I think it's also a sign of growth from sides. And, the Fever aren't necessarily going to be blowing out teams. So I think that it's really promising that they did execute in a late game situation down, 7-8 points with 4 minutes to go, and they pull it out. I mean, that's after the implosion at Chicago. It's a big sign.
Oh, Matt, I thought that game might have been over when it started yesterday. I was like, oh, my goodness, this team has 3 Olympians, and they look completely on a different level than the Indiana Fever. Obviously, the Indiana Fever came back. They won the game. Now they're, I believe as of today, the 8th seed, which would be the last playoff spot in the 12-team league. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. What do they have to do to end their playoff drought? They haven't been there, I believe, since 2016 with Tamika Catchings. Obviously, Tamika Catchings is not playing basketball anymore. So what has to change, or maybe what has to be sustained for them to get into the postseason?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. The Fever cannot, I think, at this point be 0-8 versus the top 4 teams in the league. It's just they go into these games against Connecticut, against New York, against Seattle, and they haven't even played Minnesota yet. And again, they're a team that's rebuilding. You really don't want to harp on them too much for going 0-8, but they need to pick up that win because it's so important for teams in the I guess 6 to 12 range of how well they do against the top teams, because that just holds such an edge. Because those teams, those top 6 teams are really good. So if those teams in the 6 to 12 spot can get those wins, and other teams around them aren't able to do that, that's going to separate themselves. So I think that this win is just bigger than, hey, this is their most signature win of the season so far. I mean, they have the Aces. Then they play the New York Liberty. I mean, this could be a big momentum shift for them to finally get a win against some of the best in the league, and that's going to carry a lot of weight. They're gonna have to start doing that if they really want to maybe get into more comfortable positioning rather than being on the bubble of the playoffs.
Hey, when you look at the fact that the Fever are playing in front of sold-out crowds or big crowds basically everywhere they go, are those typically Fever-friendly fans? I know that sounds crazy. Are people showing up to root against Caitlin Clark, or are people showing up to be a part of the phenomenon?
I actually think it's a little bit of both, because I was saying this last week where it's just, whenever I'm there 2.5 hours, 2 hours before, even with road games, there's just a full section right by the tunnel, waiting for Caitlin. She always takes time to sign the memorabilia. So, I think in a place like Chicago, I just think perfectly described it, where obviously the home crowd really wanted to cheer for the Sky, but there was also a big contingent of Fever fans and Caitlin Clark fans as well. So it made for a really big atmosphere. So, I mean, there's Caitlin Clark fans nationwide. They're showing up to these games. So, it's definitely not like you're going into a 17,000, sort of playoff atmosphere that's really ruckus. It's a little bit more mixed, I would definitely say.
Her comments of late, when Matt Byrne is our guest, by the way, talking about the Fever, he's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. When Caitlin Clark made the comment, and I'm paraphrasing, hey, nobody offers me advice. Like, no players come up to talk to me. And I think she even said, like, I wish they would, or something along those lines. Did you take that as a comment in passing, or how do you think the league received that comment?
I don't really know. I think that for her to say that, and then Dan Taurasi, Brittany Griner come up to her pregame and kind of, give her a hug, say a few words.
And Griner talked to her for a second there, right?
Yeah. It definitely seemed prolonged. So I think for her to say that and then have a direct response by the Phoenix Mercury, Olympians and stuff, they could have been a little bit harder on her, a little bit more of an unwelcome there. They're very welcoming, and I think that was just a very heartwarming moment from the league. And even though things, I guess, got a little bit chippy later, it was just kind of good to see, some Olympians kind of usher in the new in a really welcoming way. I think that's really good for the WNBA moving forward. When Caitlin first got into the league in the first month or two, maybe some players weren't really receptive to that, and they were going to say, hey, welcome to the bigs. I don't necessarily truly know if Caitlin if that was kind of like a jab at some players for not necessarily maybe being the most receiving at the beginning, but it was definitely a really good thing to see from DT and BG at the beginning of the game. That was awesome.
Last one I'll ask you before we get out of here, but Matt, what has been the biggest adjustment for you personally going from being a student a few months ago at IU to covering one of the biggest athletes in the world?
Oh, man. Yeah. I guess it's kind of sometimes hard to believe that I'm still 22 and this is the, first gig out of school, and I'm really grateful for that. I don't know. I think the biggest thing is that it's sometimes just kind of crazy to see the reach that, Caitlin has, and it's definitely changed. I didn't take as much video as I guess I used to, and I think that kind of really helps. People on Twitter seeing that, fans, seeing that as well. But no, I mean, it's been a big shift. There were some opportunities in the spring of my senior year where I think I could, get more confidence in my reporting. Really grateful for that as well. And at least I hope that it's kind of translated to this beat as well. A lot of great people on the beat, including you, James, as well. That's made the transition really smooth for a 22-year-old out of college.
So, Matthew, you claim that you are, revitalizing the mid-range game in terms of pickup basketball. Are you the Andrew Nimhart of the hyper?
No, that line got created because all senior year I would just go into pickup basketball games with my friends, and no one would guard me on the 3-point line, and I would shoot and I would miss. So I had to create a reputation somehow, and that was taking a few steps in, and then I guess it kind of became a bit where I started making some mid-range, and I stuck to it.
It's a lost art, man. It's a lost art, right?
It is. I try to every time I'm playing, I always say that the long two is better than the three. So
clutchpoints.com is where you can read not only Matthew's mid-range work, but his pieces that are three-pointers as well. Matthew, we appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jake. Thanks for having me on, James. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Appreciate it. Again, Matthew Byrne joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line talking about the Indiana Fever. James, you a mid-range guy, outside shooter, slasher? What are you?
I'm a slasher. Played twice last week, actually, and I can finish pretty good with both hands around the rim.
Can you dunk?
I can't dunk. I've been very close for a long time, but nope, never threw it down.
To me, the only reason that when I was a much younger guy that I couldn't dunk, you're going to laugh, couldn't palm a basketball. Can you palm a basketball?
No, I can't.
I cannot palm a basketball. And that's why, because that requires it's a different elevation that's necessary, right?
Yeah, I mean, I back rimmed it a few times. I can still, even now, like if I just run and jump, I can go jump on, hang on the rim, but I can't dunk it. That's the one thing I can't do on the basketball court. Not saying I'm some elite player, but I mean, obviously everyone wants to dunk. I just can't do it.
Eddie, you're familiar with Matt Hiblin, right?
I am.
Who is the executive producer of WIBC, our sister station, works here in the building. Hiblin will have my back on this because he was on my team. At least I hope he would have my back on this. I was an intramural baller at IU. I had one intramural season where I was in the zone for an entire year. It was great. Had 39 in the semifinal game at the Hyper on court 2. Still dream about it. I'm telling you what, I can flat out get it done. Mid-range, long-range, slasher, you name it. And then when I was 42 or 3, I was playing pickup basketball. I went up for a routine rebound that I have put back 1,000 times, and some young buck got it and kept elevating, and I literally said, "That's it. I'm done." And I have not played since. You got to know. You got to know when, right?
That's fair. That's why I'm 28, turn 29 later this year, but I'm gonna play as long as I can. My dad did play until probably he was about 43, 44.
That's about right. Yeah, I mean that's about when it goes. Like all of a sudden, and like I know JMV still goes out and plays pickup, so I get it. But like, I would imagine his level of physicality is not what it once was because the recovery is tougher.
That's probably true.
The hard thing for me was being taller than everybody else growing. It's so funny how growing up, I was the tallest kid all the way through, right? And then we go into high school, and I've had to play on the post my entire life. And I get to high school, and the front line at North Central is 6'9", 6'8", and 6'6". And so it's like, okay, boom. Like now all of a sudden, as a freshman, I'm still playing mostly on the post, but I know I've got to start transitioning to an outside game, and I never met a shot I didn't like, right? So I wanted to play outside knowing that was where I was going to eventually. It's so weird now, James. I'm 6'4". Most places that I go, I'm one of the taller people that walks into a room. And then I go to an NBA game, and I'm looking at TJ McConnell, and he looks literally like a child. I mean, tiny. And he's what, 6'3", 6'4"?
Yeah. I had that same experience with Drew Holiday during the Pacers-Celtics series. I was walking down the hallway at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, and Drew Holiday comes around the corner, and I'm like, dang, Drew Holiday is big.
Yes.
But out there, he looks like
tiny,
an average tiny guard.
What
guy.
is he listed as, Drew Holiday?
I believe he's 6'3".
Yeah, so and yet a strong 6'3", right? Like, think about Patrick Beverly. What's Patrick Beverly?
Patrick Beverly's, I believe, like 6'2".
Drew is 6'4".
Okay, so Drew Holiday is my height. Patrick Beverly
6'1".
Yeah, I mean, think about that. Like that means that. How tall are you, James?
I'm 5'10".
Yeah, so Patrick Beverly, who looks like, he's like a cute little guy out there, right?
he's small.
McConnell's 6'2".
And those guys look tiny. If they walk into a Starbucks, Eddie, when you're sitting there, I mean, they walk in, you're like, oh, wow. Like, how big's Nimhard? When he was at the Starbucks, I know you said you were sitting down, but did he look tall?
He looked like an average fella.
Did he look venti or grande?
Grande.
Which one's the
large?
large?
That was the size of the drink he got, by the way.
What's a small?
I think it's a short.
A short?
Yeah.
And then
6'5".
What's the medium?
Grande.
Nimhard's 6'5"?
Yeah.
So Nimhard's bigger than me.
So here's my other tangent. What do you have against Starbucks?
Nothing.
You don't like your drinks to have nicknames?
Well, I mean, that's a whole bit from some movie somewhere, but like, why did we not just say small, medium, and large? I don't go there enough to know the rules. What's the large?
I'm sorry. So it goes from demi, which is the tiny.
Oh, like
short.
Trust me, demi means you want more.
That means 3 ounces. That's 3 ounces. Short, tall, grande, venti, and then I guess there is a Treinta, which is
what?
El Grande.
Oh, now you've been called that before, right?
No.
Is that your new name? What's that called again? The Treinta?
Treinta, yeah.
Treinta.
Trenta.
How about cranium as Treinta?
Thank you.
What is that?
Grande is perfectly sufficient.
So here's my other thing though. It's like when you go to a restaurant, a fast food place, and you're like, yeah, I'll just take such and such and I guess just a large Coke. And they're like, I'm sorry, we only have, small, medium, and extra large. Okay, well then an extra large. I mean, whatever the biggest size I can get, right? Yeah. Can I get an extra large? We only have small, medium, and large. Okay, a large. I mean, whatever, like the biggest size available. Just 1, 2, and 3, right? Make it simple. One, two.
Remember
and 3.
when McDonald's offered the Super Size Me? That was the movie, but what was the large cup? The big one.
Was it a super size?
Sized? Okay, yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing, right? That's what I mean. Like,
super size me is crazy. Like that's.
Yeah. Well, you saw like the guy and he just passed away, Morgan Spurlock.
Yeah.
But the filmmaker who did the documentary Super Size Me, and his rule was that when he went through the drive-thru for 30 days, anytime they said, "Would you like it supersized?" he had to say yes, and he did 3 meals a day at McDonald's. And after 17 days, his doctor's like, "You got to quit, man. like your kidneys are shutting down.
Yeah.
Fascinating documentary. And he did a lot of cool stuff, actually, Morgan Spurlock did in terms of his documentaries. If you are just joining us,
Where have you been?
thank you, Eddie. My name is Jake Query. James Boyd, the other voice you hear on this program.
The real Jimmy.
Jimmy Cook is stuck in traffic, right?
Wait, he was able to get out of the garage. They finally got the Tesla charger fixed.
They borrowed he had a battery charger from the lawnmower that still had a little juice in it. Managed to put that in his electric car. Got a few blocks, looked outside, said, you know what, it's beautiful outside. Then looked at his map, saw that there was going to be a lot of traffic. Called James, said, can you fill in for me today? Jimmy's back tomorrow, and we're back for another hour. 2 o'clock hour coming up. A lot of talk about NBA free agency here on Query & Company. Eddie, you are musically an old soul, aren't you?
I can be, for sure.
Because you go with Rush a lot. You play a lot of the classic hits.
Journey, Bon Jovi.
Journey's cool. Bon
Queen.
Jovi's cool. Guns N' Roses, the greatest band ever assembled.
Poison, AC/DC. Just not the Beatles.
Apparently, right? The NBA free agency is kind of in full swing, but James, at the same time, it feels like it's like when you go on a roller coaster. You're going up that hill, and then you go down the first one, you're like, whoa, here we go. And then before you know it, it's over with. The big signings have kind of already taken place, right? The big splash. Paul George was the big straw mixing the whole thing, right?
There's one left.
There's one player left?
Yep. Splash
Klay
Brother number
Thompson.
2.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's going to the thought is he's going to the Lakers, right?
Or the Mavericks.
Or the Clippers.
Look.
It's the Mavericks or the Lakers.
Here's my thing with the Clippers. The Los Angeles Clippers, formerly the San Diego Clippers. How do I know they're the San Diego Clippers? Because in 1982, Terry Cummings was on the cover of Sports Illustrated as the Rookie of the Year for the San Diego Clippers, and I still have that Sports Illustrated somewhere at my parents' house because Steve Alford was in the faces in the crowd. The Los Angeles Clippers, little brother, play in the same arena.
Not anymore.
I guess they don't anymore, right? But
Correct.
Going
they
to the
did
next season.
forever, right?
Yeah.
And you have to go across the hall, depending on the home or visitors locker room, whatever else. The Los Angeles Clippers were the Jake Query team of choice, not named the Indiana Pacers, for about a 30-game period. Because in 1989, in the second round of the draft, they selected, I believe they had 2 picks. Can you look up for me, please, Eddie, look up the Clippers draft history and look up the 1989 NBA draft. And I'm going to say in the 1989 NBA draft, the Los Angeles Clippers in the first round, they didn't take Lionel Simmons. He went to Sacramento. But in the second round, they had 2 picks. And I believe they took Jeff Grayer from Iowa State along with Jay Edwards of Indiana.
Okay, we're looking in the second round.
Yeah, who did they take in the first round of the 89 draft?
They took
Loy Vaught,
Danny
maybe?
Ferry.
Oh, okay, Danny Ferry. Duke. Later to be a Pacer, by the way, even though he never played. And then in the second round, they took Jay Edwards and I believe Jeff Grayer. Is that correct? Out of Iowa State.
Clippers select Jeff Martin.
Jeff Martin.
Murray State.
Jay Edwards.
Jeff Martin. My apologies. So I was all in on the Clippers. I went out and bought a Clippers hat. I tried to buy a Clippers tank top. I sat in the Channel 6 sports office waiting for the feed to come down to see if Clippers highlights came, to see if Jay Edwards, who was undoubtedly going to be the best player in the NBA, got any minutes. I'm being facetious with that comment, but I was all in. Jay Edwards, probably my all-time favorite player. And Jay Edwards, it did not go well for him with the Clippers, nor in the NBA. But the Clippers themselves, and they're kind of a fun team, I get, because everybody in LA is a Lakers fan. So it's kind of a fun hipster team to root for. And then when the Clippers went out and they got Kawhi Leonard and they got Paul George, and it was like, here we go. And they suddenly became not necessarily a joke of a franchise, and they were a franchise that people were taking literally and legitimately. But in the end, it just felt like it was destined to blow up on them. And it never totally took off. And whether it was that Paul George was playoff P and wasn't hitting big shots when it mattered most, or there were injuries, or Kawhi Leonard was out, whatever it might be, it just never worked. And Paul George going to Philly now, you look at it and you say to yourself, and again, I don't want to turn this into a trash Paul George show, because I do think he's a great player. And I think, to be honest with you, he's a pretty good dude. I know that people are not happy with the way it ended here, but in reality, I do think that Paul George is a pretty good dude. But why would Philadelphia, when you look at the injury history of Joel Embiid, who, again, when he's healthy, is a game-changing player, but what reason do we have to believe that Philadelphia is going to be any different than the way things went for the Clippers? Are
I
they?
think the difference is that you have Tyrese Maxey over there, so he changes things for you. Young superstar next to Joel Embiid. Obviously, it's all contingent on them being healthy, but I understand why they went all in. They basically had to capitalize on the conversation we had a couple hours ago on the show. The window is now for them, and they've kind of been sniffing at it. But when you have Joel Embiid, you haven't been to the conference finals with him. That is not a badge of honor, and so they're trying to go for it. And Paul George is similar to Siakam in the sense of he's got enough left in the tank.
Does Paul George know, though, and I don't know the answer to this, but do you believe that Paul George knows that he's back to not being the guy?
I think he has conceded that already.
Yeah.
He said it when he was in LA with the Clippers. He said that it was Kawhi's team. And I think as long as he knows that he might be the second or third option even over in Philly, I mean, I'd be lying if I said Paul George wasn't a great third option.
Do you realize that Paul George now,
He's made a lot of money, yes.
do you want to guess? I looked it up. Do you want to guess after this contract what his total earnings will be?
I'm going to guess that after this contract, it'll be $468 million.
Higher, but yes, he's over $500 million.
Dang.
This one's for
Really?
200, right?
Yeah, I know he had a max before that. I can't remember if this is his third max contract, but wow. Ooh, Lord.
I believe this takes him to like $510 million. Now you got I mean, that's
Yeah,
not
I
to
know.
say he's got $510 million, but I mean, come on. He's a great player, and not to revisit it, but I understand why he left here, for example, or why he asked his way out, and in the end, he ended up where he wanted to be. Playing for the Clippers. Didn't work out, and now here he is in Philly.
$516,917,000 and some other few dollars.
Don't forget the some other few bucks.
Yeah, I'm about to say,
26.
I could hold some of those. I need $26 right now.
Eddie, that is definitely what's that word for the biggest Starbucks thing?
Treinta?
Trinta. That's a Trinta amount of money, right?
Yes.
A lot of money.
I would take it.
You would take the money? I would hope.
I'd take the Trinta, right? But he's the big splash.
You could finally go off to Wyoming with all your dogs.
Yeah, I think they're going to
done.
be a good team, though. I think they're really going to be a good team. And I understand injuries.
Philly, you're talking about?
Yes, I think they're going to be.
How would you power rank the East right now?
Boston number 1. Give me Philly number 2.
Okay.
Knicks 3. Pacers 4. That's where I'm going.
I'll tell you what. I think we're overlooking. I think a healthy Milwaukee is still right there.
I don't know. I had this conversation with Eddie before we came on air today, and I'm just like, I don't know. I think they're an older team.
Back in his day.
That's what I'm like. They don't have. I mean, they blew it up to get Damian Lillard. They got rid of Drew Holiday. They thought they upgraded with Lillard. I understand injuries were a factor, but they're not getting any younger. And as great as Giannis is, if we're keeping it all the way real, he's hurt pretty much every other year as well in the postseason. Even the year that they won it in 2021, he was hurt during that playoff run. Like, it seems like every year, I don't know if it's like a pattern or if it's just unluckiness, he gets hurt every year in the postseason or right before.
If you are factoring in teams based on assuming they stay healthy, which is unrealistic, I realize. But if you were considering it that way, Milwaukee has to be there just based on Giannis and Lillard alone. And then Drew Holiday's, I mean, there are, or not Drew Holiday.
Chris Middleton.
Chris Middleton, thank you. And
But
I realize
is
Holiday's
he
gone,
all-star, all-NBA Chris Middleton anymore? I don't think so. I feel
But
like
I think those two alone are really big for them.
that's true. And I hear you, but I look at the rest of their roster and I'm like, where else do you compete with the rest of the top teams in the Eastern Conference?
I mean, that's fair because they don't have the depth for sure.
And that's
right?
why I think the Pacers have an edge with a lot of teams. They have a lot of depth and a lot of good
one of the
players.
aspects that hurts Milwaukee probably is a couple of their pieces that you can see the fall off is coming very quickly, right?
Yeah.
In their auxiliary pieces. But New York, you said third?
I would put them third behind Philly. And
The
I know
thing about
Philly
New
is
York is
crazy
you
at number 2. But yeah.
you forget that Julius Randle, somebody pointed that out to me earlier, and it's a very good point. You forget that Julius Randle's healthy. That totally changes New York.
I'm actually going to be fascinated to see if he's willing
I was gonna
to
say
step back and be a team player over a me player, because historically through his career, he's been all about Julius Randle, not about the others.
I should get a Julius Randle jersey.
I mean, that's the money question: is how does he fit with this version of the Knicks? Because they were good enough, to me, if they had stayed healthy, to get to the conference finals without him. And so when he comes back, this is no longer Julius Randle's team. And he has to accept that and embrace that.
He's
and
kind of a black hole, right?
A little bit. And to me,
but
sometimes.
He's got shooters now to distribute out and around to.
That's true. But sometimes I think that he has to embrace, and I'll give Jason Tatum credit here. He has to be able to affect the game when he's not making shots. When he's not making shots, sometimes it can get really rough for Julius Randle. And it can become a black hole, and it can become, a little bit of me basketball. But I do think if he can, and it's a big if with a lot of egos involved, and, it's like that with all athletes. But if he can change his mindset and say to himself, I am the number 2 on this team, or number 2 is fair on this team, then they can be really good. If he comes back and he's like, it's still my team, and Jalen Brunson isn't like the number 1 guy, it's like 1A and 1B. No, it ain't, brother. Like, that is Jalen Brunson's team now. And I'm curious to see if they run it back with him. I'm not saying they're moving this offseason, but I'm like, is he a long-term piece for them? Seriously? I don't know. That's a good problem for the Knicks to have, I suppose.
This is from my buddy Andrew. Healthy or unhealthy, doesn't matter. The Pacers can handle Milwaukee. They don't scare me. I like that. I like that confidence.
Oh,
right?
yeah, I like that confidence as well. But I understand what you're saying. They have 2 top 75 players of all time on their team, but they're not getting any younger, and their depth isn't getting any better. It'll take what it took for the Mavericks, for example, to get to the conference finals or get to the finals. Both your best players play out of their mind, and then your role players, you do just enough to get you to where you got to go. And that's what it's going to take. And I just don't trust that Damian Lillard and Giannis are going to play out of their mind for, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20 playoff games to go to the finals. Like, I just don't trust that, mainly because of the age and the health.
I'm going to name to you, James Boyd, the player. I'm going to name to you the team and the years, and I want you to tell me what they got in NBA free agency. No peeking. You ready? Folks at home can play along. Derek White with the Celtics, 4 years.
I know this one off the top of my head because I just looked at it before we talked about it, but 126.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. Delon Wright, 1-year deal with Milwaukee.
Was it 3.3?
Correct. Same as Eric Gordon. That's got to be some sort of a vet
I'm into
minimum,
like
right?
the contracts. No phone. Everyone,
okay.
The phone is down.
Drew Eubanks, not to be confused with Bob, with the Utah Jazz, 2-year deal.
$10 million.
That is correct.
Let's go.
I mean, come on, man.
Hey, this is my thing.
Tobias Harris, 2-year deal, Detroit Pistons.
52, because I was $26 million a year. He is a professional bag stealer. He is a professional bank robber. That man has he's made over $300 million in his career when it's all said and done. Never made an all-star team.
You know what he is?
It's like the Kirk Cousins of the NBA.
Okay,
yeah.
Listen.
I would love to be him.
That is a very good comparison.
I would love to be him.
You know my 2 terms.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Now, he's not a 2025 guy, but he's close. You know a 2025 guy. You know what that's Aquarius. I'm a 2025 guy. You can use this at the Athletic. James Boyd. A guy destined to score 20 a game on a 25-win team his whole career. Now, you also have Tobias Harris, I think, has gotten a few of these in the past, a TJ Maxx contract.
Yeah.
Looks like a max contract, but not necessarily the max value,
That's
right?
so great.
TJ Maxx contract. All right, here we go. I thought it was Andrew Wiggins. It is not. Aaron Wiggins with Oklahoma City. He gets a 5-year deal for?
Oh, see, I don't know this one. I'm going to say 52.
47.
Very close.
I'm close. Dang.
Okay. Isaiah Joe, also with Oak City, 4-year deal.
Oh, I don't know this one. I'm going to say.
Both of these got announced at the same time. So
I'm going to say 48.
Correct. On the nose.
Oh, wow. That was a pure guess.
Okay.
The money these guys make is unheard of. Oh, my goodness.
Derek Jones to the Clippers, 3 years.
That was like 36 or 39, something like that.
30.
36, 30, okay.
I think that's basically all of them.
Not bad.
But can you imagine?
Shot about
I mean,
80% from the field on that.
How about Contavious Caldwell-Pope getting?
Oh yeah, that was 3 years, $66 million for him. And that's the thing too. And I guess the Pacers are in a good spot where they don't have anyone on their team that has accomplished enough to like say, I can just go take the money now, if that makes sense. Like Obi Toppin, for example, he never really got paid to go. Like he hadn't won a championship. So it's not like he's going to go chase, the money now. It's kind of like if I can get the best of both worlds. And so they're in a pretty good spot because you have certain teams where, from what I understand, KCP, Contavious Caldwell-Pope, was offered pretty much the same amount of money to stay in Denver, but he chose Orlando because Texas, most likely.
Well, here's the other thing.
And plus, they have a song.
Okay. If you look at Nembhard,
he's going to get money.
I don't know when exactly this would kick in, and maybe it's now. But NBC, for example, is going to pay, $2.6 billion in television rights to acquire the NBA or to get involved with the NBA? The money that you hear about that gets spread around in free agency is always on, you want to time it. Lance Stevenson is a very good example. When Lance Stevenson
I know where you're going with this.
was getting ready to sign his second contract in the NBA, and the Pacers offered him I believe it was a 5-year deal. And he instead took a lesser amount to go to Charlotte on a 4-year deal. And people were like, what an idiot. He gambled on himself, granted, and it didn't work out for him. But I understood the mentality and the philosophy, because to sign with the 4-year instead of 5-year deal, it was all about looking at when the new collective bargaining agreement was going to factor in the newest television contract and the amount that teams had to spend. And for Lance Stevenson, and I can't remember the exact years it was, that was like in probably 2014 or 15. So he's looking at it and he's saying, I want to be there.
Yep, I remember this.
As a free agent in 2019.
Yep.
That's the big year. And my years might be off, but I'm using that as an example. And instead, they want to sign me through 2020.
Right.
And that's gonna handcuff me because 2019 is the year to cash in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally, it was Oprah Winfrey. You get a big contract, and you get a big contract. And,
Everyone gets a big contract.
Brian Cardinal gets $78 million. I mean, everyone's getting a big deal, right? So you wanted to make sure that you timed it right, because it's about timing oftentimes as much as anything. And I don't know when, and maybe it's this year. I don't know. I don't know when that new NBC deal, for example, continues to escalate the cap space or the salary cap number. But that's the year that you want to get involved. I mean, that's when you want to cash in, right? So if you're Nembhard, if that year has yet to happen, you probably say to yourself, I'm going to wait until another year when that kicks in, because then my market value might go from $18 million a year to $28 million a year, or whatever it may be. I'm throwing out generic numbers, but you understand my point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it is crazy to think that there would be a difference in your mindset between getting paid $28 million and $32 million a year. But then you look at a guy like Eric Gordon, who's at the end, and it's like, somebody's going to pay me $3.3 to just go and play for you. Okay, sure. Let's go. I understand why George Hill, when we talked to him 6 months ago, was still trying to get onto a roster somewhere. I totally get why. Because you got a chance to just go ahead and pad the pocketbook with another $3 to $4 million. Okay. Put it in there, because once you're done, you're done. You're retired. You're done. I mean, it's not like go on about your business, right?
Yeah.
But you've got tens to hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank. It's crazy. Now, that's not to say, and I think that, and look, I know that we're splitting hairs here when we're talking about massive, obscene amount of wealth. But if a guy, for example, is getting $52 million a year, what amount of that, James, do you think he's actually getting at the end of the day? $25 million?
Yeah, I was going to say taxes are going to beat you over the head for sure.
Taxes, agency fee.
Yeah.
That alone right there is a significant amount. I mean, it's still, you're after everything, you're cleared $25 million, right?
Yeah, you're living good.
I mean, can you imagine? Yes, I can imagine. I've thought about it a lot, right?
I really can't imagine it. I mean, you can in theory, but
you understand why
yeah.
guys get in trouble. You understand why guys, truthfully, go like basically bankrupt because it's so much money that you would have you go from, and I know this is a stereotype here, but the vast majority of players in the NBA, because the vast majority of people in the world can't fathom what $25 million is in a year, right? Let alone if you grow up where you're not around money at all, and I'm not saying that's the case with all these guys, but certainly with some of them, or you grow up middle class, and all of a sudden you're in that level. But I understand why, especially in the first contract, why guys run through it, because you would theoretically think to yourself, this doesn't even impact my balance. Like you go in and you're looking at a Bentley and somebody's like, man, that car's $200,000. And you're like, yeah, but I got $25 million. I could buy 125 of these things. Sure, I'll buy one. And then 6 months later, you're like, that Ferrari's really nice. And hell, it's only 90. I already paid 200 for one. Sure, I'll buy that. Boom. And now all of a sudden, before you know it, it adds up quick, right? Allen Iverson. I'm going to buy a different suit for every game on the road and leave it in the hotel. I'm never going to wear the same suit twice. Theoretically, in the beginning, that's fine, but it adds up quick.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, my Eddie, my two-bedroom cabin, my two-room cabin in Wyoming with rescue dogs is not going to cost a lot. So I'm good, right?
Yeah.
So if you can go pro in any sport, young Jake, what sport would you have gone pro in?
Well, okay. Are we talking okay, clearly at this point, the sleeper in this, there's one that people overlook.
Pickleball.
Okay, allow me to ask this. Are you talking about just as an average player or as an elite star?
As an elite star, like you're the guy.
The smart answer is not my answer. My answer is NBA, and a lot of that is because you get the summers off, and I love the summertime.
Yeah,
Love it. The smart answer probably is Major League Baseball, because I think you have less wear and tear on your body, and the money. People don't realize the money in that. Big time money, especially if you're a pitcher. Being a pitcher would probably be the deal, because I only got to play every 5 games. But the number of times, I remember once asking Jim Edmonds when I covered the Cardinals, I said, hey, I'm curious. Are there ever times when you're out in the outfield, like where you're just bored? And he goes, dude, like standing out in center field for a doubleheader against the Marlins in South Florida. He's like, there are times I'm standing out there and I'm literally like trying to keep myself awake because it's hot and it's, it's not hard work, don't get me wrong, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. And speaking of baseball money, it's Bobby Bonilla Day.
1.9, right?
Yep. He's getting 1.19 per year through 2035.
May I present 2 other sports?
Okay.
Feel free.
Golf.
Oh, golf's a really good one. That's a really good one.
Soccer.
Yeah, I didn't realize this, Jake, until I just maybe noticed it more just following, some of the more major athletes in the world. But if you're like a Latin or Hispanic star in soccer, or as many of them call it, football, like your following on social media, your reach is huge.
Yeah.
I'll click on to me,
it is
a
weird,
random player from some Brazil team or whatever, and they'll have 20 million followers on Instagram.
Here's what's bizarre about it. Here's what's bizarre about it. What's crazy to think is if you take a player that is a big-time star for, Chelsea or Barcelona or Man U, okay, and they've got 20 million social media followers and a salary of $55 million a year, and yet they can walk through an airport in the United States probably with relative anonymity, right? And that's where you realize it's all relative because you realize then that Justin Jefferson, the same thing happens to him if he's walking through a mall in Barcelona, right? Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, good point.
Jonathan Taylor could walk into a pub in London and probably nobody knows who he is, even if he says, my name's Jonathan Taylor and I play football in the United States.
Yeah.
And
That's
they're like,
the perfect
okay.
kind of fame to have. Like TJ McConnell could walk down the street pretty much anywhere in America outside of Indianapolis and no one probably know who he is. That is the best kind of fame there is, or best kind of status, I should say.
And he's making $8 million a year, right? Now, and he's a value at this point, TJ McConnell. I've always said, like with IndyCar drivers and those that are driving in the Indy 500, if you look at like Elio Castroneves, Tony Kanaan, Marcus Ericsson. Now, Ericsson's maybe a bad example because he raced in Formula One. But in their respective countries, Brazil, Sweden, France with Simon Pagenaud, for example, and they grew up going through the ranks, and people are like, oh, man, like I've seen this guy race, and he's going to be an F1 star. And then a couple years later, somebody says, hey, whatever happened to that guy that like Tony Kanaan from Brazil that we thought was going to be an F1? Whatever happened to him? And the answer they say is, oh, well, he's racing in the States now. I mean, they make good money there, but, you know, he's in the States. It's the same as a player that plays at Indiana or Purdue, and you say, whatever happened to that guy? Is he playing? What happened to Yogi Ferrell? Is he in the NBA? No, he's playing overseas. Now, they make good money over there, but he's not in the NBA. And it's the same thing. To those countries, IndyCar drivers, that's their European basketball.
Two things. One, you sounded a little bit like Mark Ratner there. Second, according to Forbes, 5 of the top 10 richest athletes are soccer players.
Whatever happened to that Damone? And they say that a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, soccer players. I mean, what does Ronaldo get? I would assume Ronaldo or Messi's number, although Messi's now over here. What's Ronaldo a year?
His on-field earnings $200 million. His off-field earnings $60 million. So a total of $260
for a year.
Yeah,
that's righteous bucks, right?
John Rahm second, Lionel Messi third, and then you've got Kylian Mbappe sixth, Neymar seventh, and a guy I can't say eighth.
What about guys that go into Live Golf and get the money up front?
John Rahm is second.
What's his number?
218 total earnings million.
I mean, come on. 218 for a year, right?
Yeah.
But that's probably upfront money, right? He probably got 218 up front from Live, and then that's it. Right?
That's something right there. Wow.
I mean, hello, right?
Show me the money, I guess.
I play one contract.
See, but that's the other thing. I think that's the trade-off is like they're wired to like be these competitive.
Well, and I also
because I promise you, I would not work.
I also get the fact that as soon as you see that first check and you're like, wait a minute, if I play another 5 years, I get to keep doing this for 5 more years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sign me up. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Big time money flying around with free agency. Sign me up. I'd be part of it. when NFL free agency went wild one year, and I believe it was the Washington, then Redskins, now Commanders, that were loading up, and it was like, holy cow, they're getting everybody. They are loaded. They got Deion Sanders. They got Bruce Smith. They had all these big names.
Sounds like Washington
And then-
to this day still.
Yeah, exactly. And then people figured out, though, they were like, wait a minute. They just signed the 1991 NFC All-Pro team. The only problem is it's like 1996 now. And it's very easy to fall in love with who players were versus who players are in the moment. Having said that, perfect segue for the latest free agent signing. Because I think this guy's a good player, but the question's going to become, is he the player that he is right now, or can he kind of recapture the fountain of youth? Klay Thompson agreeing to terms, Eddie, with
The Dallas Mavericks on a 3-year, $50 million deal that has a player option on the final year. It will be a sign-and-trade situation with 3 teams. It appears it'll be Golden State, Dallas, and Charlotte. The only name outside of Klay Thompson to Dallas that we know of right now is Josh Green, going from the Mavericks to the Hornets.
Oh, can you imagine? I just retire.
The finals to the gutter. Seriously.
I mean, the Hornets might be the most obscure and worst franchise in the NBA now,
So
right?
my hot take is that counts against Michael Jordan's GOAT case. How can you be so good at basketball as a player and so horrible as a team builder?
Okay, I have an answer for that. It's a great question, and I truly believe this. I think, James, the biggest obstacle that great players have, Michael Jordan, I mean, there's no doubt that his natural athleticism, I mean, he had a lot of things going for him, right? But
Best player of all time, in my opinion.
his drive, his instinct.
It's terrible as a GM.
I watched plenty of games with Jordan in them, okay? Regular season, postseason, whatever. And there was no doubt that everybody in the building knew that if it was a 5-point game, 7-point game, whatever it might be, that more often than not, at the end of that game, Jordan's team was going to win because he was just going to find the ball was going to find him. He was going to find his way to score or make a play in some way, shape, or fashion because he just instinctively, I mean, the prime play being Karl Malone back into the basket, and then Jordan comes around, slaps the ball away, goes down, gets the push off, hits the shot. And I think the thing that is difficult for players like that just have such a feel naturally for the game and in a natural instinct, is they assume that all players have that. And so they err in putting together rosters because they are under the assumption that every player has the same natural, innate IQ that they had. And they forget that some things need to be coached, taught, or just are not possessed. In Larry Bird's case, another obviously legendary player, from a coaching standpoint, when Larry Bird became a coach, he was put into a situation where he had a very veteran-laden team. So he had Reggie Miller, he had Mark Jackson, he had Rick Smits, he had Sam Perkins for that matter, Chris Mullen. So he had veterans that didn't need a lot of that sort of like guidance. When it came down to Larry Bird then building rosters, he wasn't awful at it, but he wasn't legendary at it, partially not because of his inability to associate how players would be from an IQ on the floor standpoint, but rather he assumed that all of them had the same mentality he did in terms of being a player that followed the lead of the coach and then went with that. You know, Paul don't make the decisions around here. You know, I think Larry Bird underrated the feeling of power and influence that today's players have. But in Jordan's case, to go back to that, I think as much as anything, it's just the fact that he was so hardwired from a competitive and driven standpoint and instinctive standpoint that it was hard for him to grasp that not every player is.
I hear you on all of that. Larry Bird also won Executive of the Year when he was in a front office role. I'm sorry, but for the Charlotte Hornets to be as bad as they are, and for us to just know no matter what they do, they're going to be terrible. Like it's to the point now, Jake, where I truly believe they cannot be good unless he's no longer the owner of the team.
Well, he's not.
Like I know he like got sold his. I think he's still like part of the minority ownership. He's no longer a majority owner of the team. But yeah, I feel bad for Josh Green because, oh Lord.
I mean, it's just that the Hornets are a franchise that you literally forget about them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch them ever. Like, I went. Do
I
they
mean,
have
you
any
never hear
national
about them.
Yeah, I don't ever want to watch them.
You never hear about them.
And then
And I don't even think in Charlotte you hear about them.
Nah, I mean, my tie to the Charlotte Hornets is Muggsy Bogues.
When you think of the Charlotte Hornets, first player you think of? Muggsy?
Muggsy, seriously.
Eddie Garrison, you think of the Hornets, who's the first player you think of?
Kimball Walker.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I'd go Larry Johnson.
Yeah, Grandmama. Okay. And you got LaMelo Ball's their star now, but he's always hurt. So, I mean, we're on a tangent here, and I guess I'll drive back on the tracks now. But so you have Clay leaving to go to the Mavericks. It doesn't really affect the Pacers in the East, I suppose. But we see another, like.
But it's Klay Thompson still Klay Thompson? I mean, that's the question. That number's not huge, right?
No, it's not huge, and it shouldn't be. I mean, this is the same player. As great as Klay Thompson is, 5-time All-Star, 4-time champion. We know he's a prolific shooter, one of the game's best players we've ever seen. He's a future Hall of Famer. He could retire today and be in the Hall of Fame tomorrow if he wanted to. But he also shot 0 for 10 in their season-ending loss, I believe. Was it to the Kings? And he scored 0 points. And so it seems like it's unfathomable that he'd be leaving the Warriors and that great dynasty that they had. But it is what it is. I will say, though, the Warriors are dead right now. I don't know what they do to be relevant with Stephen Curry. I mean, he can't do it by himself. Good luck. But I think that ship has sailed.
And that's what I was talking about when teams now, when you see, holy cow, look at this team loading up. They have A, B, and C. You have like a 2 to 3 year window where, especially when you have elite players that are joining forces, if it's not going well, the margin for getting it right is not very long before it just everybody knows it's over. I mean, Phoenix is a prime example.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say Golden State had a chance to check a guy that fits both 2025 and TJ Maxx, and they said no thanks. They just decided to waive Chris Paul instead. Chicago offered Zach LaVine for Chris Paul and Andrew Wiggins, and Golden State said, nah, no thanks.
Andrew Wiggins, what's happened to him? He was a really good player that's just completely fallen off the face of the earth.
Yeah, I know I believe he had some family stuff going
Correct.
on the past couple of seasons, and so it's obviously derailed some things there for him. But to your point about the Pacers, they are in a spot where they don't have to do a panic move. They're building, and I would even say at the moment they're probably ascending versus trying to stay afloat, where I think some of these teams that we've seen be there, for quite some time in recent years, I don't think they're going to be there in the same way we view them. For example, as much as we talk about LeBron and the Lakers, they're not a championship caliber team to me. Same thing with the Warriors, same thing with Milwaukee. We're seeing a change, a little bit at least, in some of the teams that we expect to do some damage here. I mean, obviously Boston's been there every year the last 5 or 6 with the 2 J's, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. But some of these teams that we're seeing make some moves, we haven't really seen them, be there.
It's actually 3 J's, isn't it?
Am I missing something?
Eddie? Isn't Drew Holiday there?
Oh, my goodness. I was thinking Jay, like Jalen and Jason.
3J was an awesome. It
3J.
later became Thunder Island, but 3J was awesome in Westfield when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Go-kart track. Shannon Doherty filmed a movie there. Water slides, you name it. This, by the way, on Twitter to me, Jake, the Hornets are always catching strays on this program. I don't think we've ever mentioned the Hornets before, have we?
I know I haven't.
Probably not.
For the record, Charlotte loves the Hornets, and it's very much pride in place despite how terrible they are. It just seems
Great.
like the folks that I know that live in Charlotte and maybe they're biased because I know people that are down there because of auto racing stuff, and they're like, yeah, the the Panthers are huge and NASCAR's huge, and the
Charlotte
Hornets are just
deserves
third.
better. They deserve better than the Hornets and the Panthers at this current moment. And Michael Jordan, as much as you are loved from where I grew up in the Chicago
Now
area, you ruined that franchise.
So these are technically the Bobcats, right? Isn't that right?
What do you mean? Oh, yes.
This installment of the Hornets was the Bobcats,
Right.
and the original Hornets, like your Muggsy Bogues, Larry Johnson Hornets, are the New Orleans Pelicans.
Right, yeah. Unfortunately.
Technically speaking. Muggsy Bogues, it fascinates me that's the guy you go with.
So my dad's a big basketball historian type of guy, and so
I mean, Muggsy's cool, but that's a little before your time, isn't it?
it is before my time. But I think being obsessed with guys like Spud Webb, I mean, being a short guy, 5'10", I guess average American height, but as far as sports, I'm short. So I always had an affinity for guys who kind of had the David and Goliath feel. So
Spud Webb and Muggsy Bogues played collegiately in the same state. Name the two schools.
Ooh, I gotta think about this.
Eddie. Spud Webb, Muggsy Bogues played collegiately in the same state. Name the two schools.
Massachusetts.
Okay?
Couldn't tell you.
All right. I'll tell you on the other side. Tyrone Muggsy Bogues, by the way. How about if I told you, James Boyd, that he went to the same university as former Pike star and later Pacer and, amongst other team, point guard Jeff Teague?
Oh, Wake Forest?
Wake Forest, correct. Spud Webb, on the other hand, went to, what if I told you he went to the school that produced later Colt quarterback Phillip Rivers?
I actually don't know what college he went to.
And Russell Wilson.
NC State.
NC State is correct.
Yeah, that is true.
For Spud Webb. Spud Webb was a phenom, phenom's the wrong word. He was a pop cultural phenomenon, though, when he won the dunk contest. And I believe he wore ponies.
Yeah, he did. He did.
And,
he did.
At that time, Dominique Wilkins wore Brooks. I know because I had posters of both. And I sat outside Market Square Arena on the east ramp of Market Square Arena where the visitors' bus was, and we stood out trying to get tennis shoes from players. That was the big thing. You stand out there and you wait and then hope that guys would give you their shoes. And Roy Henson was really cool about it. Trent Tucker was always really cool. For the Knicks, Gerald Wilkins gave my buddy and I a pair of shoes. And without question, And it was right after that dunk contest, but without question, the guy that was kind of the biggest horse's rear was Spud Webb. I remember saying, like, man, I have your poster and everything. And I think he said something like, you and every other kid. Just like kept walking. I get it now, like in hindsight. I'm sure we were totally annoying. But, you know, he's like, look, I'm from North Carolina, and I'm playing now in Atlanta, and it's 10 degrees out here, and you want me to, like, stand and hang around and go find a pair of shoes. I'm getting on the bus. Totally get it.
Fair enough.
Totally
Fair
get
enough.
it. James, what sort of things you working on for the Athletic here?
So I got some stuff where I'm looking at the roster. Obviously, I'll have something coming out on that pretty soon. I have another list of players maybe that's under the radar, where I think that if their seasons are going to determine how far the Colts go. And so they're not the list of players isn't Anthony Richardson, it's not John Taylor. It's kind of like some secondary pieces where they could become really big issues if they don't play well. Put it like that.
Is Alec Pierce on that list?
He's not, because he's been talked about a lot.
Is the sand going through the hourglass on him? Do we know yet what kind of player Alec Pierce is?
I don't. I'm going to say I don't know because he hasn't had the quarterback back that they can throw it downfield. But I do think that the hourglass is sort of ticking, because if it wasn't, they wouldn't have drafted another wide receiver in the second round to
Is that a wake-up call for him?
It has to be. They basically said, our wide receiver core is not good enough because that guy is not good enough, and they drafted a guy whose traits mirror yours. He's a deep threat. He's a fast guy.
I think that Atlanta game really, solidified the reasoning for them to need another wideout. Like, no Michael Pittman Jr. in that game against the Falcons, and the offense can do anything in the passing game.
That is true. Yeah, that was rough. And I remember Alec had a drop in that game that was kind of brutal too.
And they didn't really have anyone that can win one-on-one. Like, outside of Josh Downs, you don't really have many guys that can win one-on-one.
The interesting thing I think that we overlook with receivers, and James, you tell me if you agree or disagree. I think oftentimes we think of receivers as what can they do in terms of getting behind a defense, but we overlook the fact that oftentimes receivers get open at the line, not away from it. The way that you come off of the line and the movement that you make there can go a long way in determining how your play is going to go in terms of the defense. And there are guys they've had in the past that are Reggie Wayne was outstanding at it. He didn't have to get behind defenses because his footwork was so good. Marvin Harrison the same. Harrison could do both, which is what made Marvin Harrison Marvin Harrison. But I think we think that Alec Pierce is a guy that can just run behind a defense, and then at that point a big arm gets him the football. And I don't know. I mean, it'd be a question for Reggie Wayne. Is he having problems getting off the line? And is that allowing a defense to close in on him? But give me the name of another one in your column. Not to give your column away, but give me the name of another one.
Another player that's sort of under the radar, I would say Dio Odangbo. Mainly because they paid Kwity Paye. They drafted the defensive end. Is this somebody that is going to be here for the long term? I think his goal this season has to be to put some pressure on the Colts and say, hey, I deserve to get paid too.
How much are you, and I battle with this, James, I do. James Boyd, who, of course, covers the Colts for The Athletic, has been in studio with us today. The situation, and I'm hoping that it ends well, but I've mentioned it on this show a few times now. The situation with former Colt Daniel Muir and his son, who is now, I don't know if they would essentially say that he's missing, but unaccounted for is a better way of saying it, after the boy's grandmother, and I don't know if that's maternal grandmother or paternal.
I'm not sure either. That wasn't clarified.
But the boy's grandmother alerted officials that she had concerns over his well-being.
Yep.
He then was back in the custody of his parents. I believe he is 15 or 16 years old.
He's 14.
14, okay.
Yep.
And when police went to essentially see, they pulled over the car with his parents, and he was not in the car that they believed he was in, and they have yet to find where the boy is, and former Colt Daniel Muir and his wife have now said that they will not cooperate with authorities after originally agreeing to being questioned, and they are living on, I'm going to use in air quotes here the term loosely, a compound in Logansport, Indiana, that apparently has religious connection as to this compound. How much, because it's a former Colt player, do you guys cover or pay attention to that story?
I'm paying attention to it from a human standpoint first because I think it is concerning that they had agreed to basically show the Indiana State Police, hey, our son is alive and well. They agreed to do that, I believe, Friday at noon, and then around 11 a.m. they backed out, and you're not helping to find your son. That's pretty alarming. So I think from that standpoint, it piqued my interest, but we're not, from the athletic standpoint, and I have alerted our news team to it. It's more of a news story right now. And so I think when there's a resolution, there'll be more for me to perhaps write about, but they don't want me to basically chase a story that's still developing. We don't even know all the facts, unfortunately, that go with it. So, yeah, I've been seriously praying for the kid, obviously, and just hoping that he is produced in good health somewhere, but it doesn't look like it's a good situation right now at all.
Yeah, it's
bizarre.
I was just going to say it's bizarre. I mean, I hate to use the obvious term here, but it's a bizarre situation, right?
It is. I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts and shows. All that stuff kind of intrigues me, and it feels like this is something that's a little bit more than, a mistake. So I don't know. You obviously can't place blame on anybody. Don't know what happened exactly, but it is something to monitor. And I would just say there is a silver alert out for this kid, Bryson Muir. He's 14. He's 6'2", I believe about 180 pounds. So those out there, if you see anything, hear anything, make sure you contact the police.
By the way,
6'2" at 14?
Yeah.
Wow.
Dad's a big guy too, right?
Yeah.
By the way, we are not going to be doing shows on Thursday and Friday. Thursday, Independence Day, obviously. We'll be off Friday celebrating the independence of this country as well. But keep in mind that Thursday also is 2 weeks away from the Fan at the Back Nine Golf Tournament presented by our friends at Franciscan Health, Thursday, July 18th at the Back Nine Golf and Entertainment. Everything getting underway with doors opening at 11 a.m. We will be on the air at noon. There will also be a live auction there for the Franciscan Health, or actually a silent auction, but items up for bid to benefit Franciscan Health Foundation. Tickets are on sale right now at our website, 1075thefan.com. John will be live there. We'll be live there. James, I think you're going to be there hanging out as well.
Yes,
right?
sir.
So that is all 2 weeks from this Thursday. Speaking of J&B, he is up next. James, thanks for being in. Jimmy back tomorrow. Thanks for listening to Query & Company.